Welcome to Calming Bedtime Journeys channel. Tonight we step into a frontier cabin during a blizzard, and we ask a wonderfully unreasonable question. Could you survive one full night here? With the wind hunting every crack, the snow piling higher than the doorstep, and darkness arriving like it owns the prairie. You can almost hear the timbers complain already. You can smell cold ashes, damp wool, old smoke, and pine boards rubbed smooth by tired hands. Outside, the world has disappeared into white motion. Inside, your kingdom is one room, one fire, one door, and a suspiciously confident mouse somewhere near the flour sack. But before you settle into the story, take a second to like the video and hit subscribe, and tell us in the comments where you're listening from, and what your local time is right now. Maybe you are warm in bed, maybe midnight has found you too. Now, dim the lights. You push the rough cabin door closed with your shoulder, and the storm presses back immediately. The latch drops with a wooden clack, small and final, though not especially heroic. The room around you is dim, smoky, and colder than you expected. A frontier cabin is shelter. Yes, but it is not yet kindness. It must be persuaded into helping you survive. The first thing you notice is the sound. Snow hisses against the walls like sand poured across paper. Wind squeezes through the chinks between logs, making thin whistles near the corners. The roof groans softly beneath gathering drifts, and every groan asks a question. How much weight can hand-cut timber take before complaint becomes disaster? You stand still and let your eyes adjust. There is a hearth of stone or packed clay at one wall, blackened by many seasons. A few iron tools lean nearby, plain and serious. The floor is rough plank, or perhaps packed earth, cold enough to announce itself through your boots, somewhere above. The loft is a darker shadow under the rafters. This is not the cozy cabin of postcards. This is a working shelter, built quickly, repaired constantly, and loved mostly because it beats dying outside. Frontier families in North America often began with single-room log cabins because logs were available. Strong and familiar to many settlers, that is the mainstream fact. Plain as frozen breath. Trees became walls because trees were there. You run a hand over the door, the boards are uneven, and iron nails sit like small dark freckles. If the cabin belongs to a family moving westward, every object inside has earned its place. Nothing decorative has survived the journey unless it also works. Even a chair may have crossed rivers, mud, and months of bad decisions. The air smells of old smoke trapped in timber. Smoke has soaked into every surface, turning the cabin itself into a kind of memory. Your fingers brush a hanging blanket near the door, meant to slow the drafts. It feels stiff and woolly, a little damp, not nearly enough. Still, you're grateful for it. Outside, the blizzard has already erased distance. The barn, if there is one, might be 20 steps away or half a continent away. Trails vanish fast in driving snow, especially on open plains where wind scours one rise and buries the next. That is the real trick of a storm. It does not merely make travel hard, it removes the idea of a road. You listen for animals, people, bells, anything steady. There is only wind, the small shift of settling logs, and your own breathing. It is tempting to think silence means emptiness, but frontier nights were rarely empty. They were crowded with weather, hunger, fatigue, animals, and the ordinary fear of being very far from help. A small table stands near the hearth. On it sits a tin cup, a knife, and perhaps a twist of cloth holding dried herbs. The cup is cold when you lift it. Metal steals warmth from your fingers with almost comic enthusiasm. You set it down gently, because noise feels too bold in this room. The cabin's walls are made of stacked logs, their gaps filled with chinking. That chinking might be clay, mud, straw, moss, stones, or whatever the season allowed. Historians still argue whether many frontier cabins were as crude as later stories suggest, because memory often simplified poverty into legend. Some cabins were miserable, some were surprisingly efficient, most were both. Depending on the weather, you notice that tonight has voted for miserable. There is a narrow window covered by greased paper, oiled cloth, or perhaps a shutter. Glass was expensive and fragile in many frontier settings, especially where transport was difficult. The covering glows faintly when lightning or moonlit snow brightens outside, then turns dark again. It is less a window than a polite rumour of the outside world. Your survival begins with accepting the cabin's rules. You cannot waste heat. You cannot waste light. You cannot waste movement. The frontier has no interest in your dramatic speeches, which is rude, but consistent. It prefers small tasks done calmly, in the correct order, before panic gets invited indoors. First, you check the door again. A leather thong or wooden bar helps hold it fast. Wind shoves against it in sudden gusts. Making the latch jump, you wedge a block near the bottom, where snow might creep in through the threshold. The wood scrapes the floor with a dry, homely sound. Then you turn toward the hearth. The fire is low, not dead, and that is excellent news. A red glow hides under grey ash, like a secret being kept badly. You crouch close and feel heat touch your face, weak but living. The rest of your body remains surrounded by cold, as if winter is politely waiting its turn. You take a thin stick and nudge the coals. They brighten, giving off a soft pulse of orange. Smoke curls upward and smells sharp, resinous, a little bitter, if the chimney draws poorly. Smoke may wander the room before escaping. Many cabins were smoky enough to sting eyes and darken lungs, but people endured it because warmth mattered more than elegance. A quirky little tidbit slips into your tired mind. In some frontier households, people save scraps of cloth and paper so carefully that even old letters might become fire starters. Imagine feeding a cousin's bad handwriting to the flames because January demanded it. History is full of noble sacrifice, and also stationery being used correctly at last. You add kindling slowly. Too much at once can smother the coals, and that would be embarrassing in a deadly way. The sticks catch with tiny clicks and sighs. Soon flame climbs upward, thin and yellow, licking the underside of a larger log. Heat begins to gather near your face and hands. The room changes by inches. Shadows pull back from the hearth. The table becomes a table again, not a crouching animal. The hanging kettle shows a dull curve of reflected light. Your breath still fogs faintly, but less often now, in this place. Comfort is not a condition. It is a negotiation. You look around for what might help you last until morning. There is firewood stacked along one wall, though never enough to make you careless. A rope bed or low pallet waits near the warmer side of the room. A chest sits beneath a peg rail, possibly holding clothes, tools, or the kind of family treasures nobody called treasures yet. Every object asks to be understood. The axe near the door is not decoration. The broom of bundled twigs is not quaint. The heavy quilt is not charming. Each thing belongs to a network of survival, and tonight you're being quietly tested on material culture, very relaxing naturally. The storm bumps the wall with a blunt rush of wind. Snow sprays through a hairline gap near the corner. A faint dusting that melts on the floor. You press your palm there and feel the cold stream across your skin. It is like touching the edge of an invisible knife. You tuck a rag into the gap. The cabin accepts this improvement without applause. You begin to understand why people measured winter not only by temperature, but by labour. A blizzard turns shelter into a task that keeps repeating itself. Fire needs feeding. Drafts need stopping. Water must be found. Food must be stretched. Sleep must be earned in pieces. Survival is not one brave act. It is 100 small agreements with discomfort. You move closer to the hearth and sit on a low stool. The wood creaks under you. Your shoulders loosen slightly, though your ears keep listening. Outside, the storm continues its long white argument with the roof. Inside, flame gathers itself, brighter now, steadier now, making the cabin walls glow amber and brown. For the first time, the room feels less like a question. Not safe. Exactly. Safe is too generous, but possible. You hold your hands toward the heat and let your breathing slow. The night has only begun, and the cabin has already taught you humility. One door stands between you and the storm. One fire stands between you and the cold. One careful mind must decide what happens next. The wind rises again, rattling the shutter with impatient fingers. You do not answer it. You simply sit, listening to the old logs, the whispering snow, and the small bright crackle that says you're still here. The fires become the cabin's small, glowing heart, and you are suddenly very interested in its opinions. It snaps softly in the hearth, not roaring, not triumphant, just working. Heat folds outward in uneven waves, warming your cheeks while your back remains loyal to winter. You shift on the stool and feel the cold planks through your boots, a reminder that comfort has not been evenly distributed. You lean closer and study the flames with unusual seriousness. A modern person might call this ambiance, perhaps even rustic charm. A frontier person would call it heat, light, cooking, drying, protection, and an unpaid roommate with dangerous moods. The fire is useful, but it is never fully friendly. It must be fed, watched, respected, and occasionally argued with. The first task is fuel. You look toward the stacked firewood along the wall, each piece carrying a little piece of yesterday's labour. Someone had to cut it, split it, drag it, stack it, and keep it dry. In many frontier households, firewood took enormous time and strength, especially in winter. That is the ordinary fact hiding behind every cheerful cabin painting. Warmth was not found. Warmth was manufactured. You pick up a split log and feel its rough grain bite into your palm. The bark is cold and faintly damp, smelling of resin, dirt, and sleep-heavy forest. If the wood is too green, it will smoke badly and burn with stubborn reluctance. If it is dry enough, it will catch with a calmer dignity. Tonight, dignity would be appreciated. You place the log carefully over the coals, leaving room for air underneath. Fire likes to breathe, which is inconvenient, because so do you. Smoke thickens for a moment and rolls into the room before finding the chimney. It stings your eyes, making them water. The smell grows sharper, and your throat tightens slightly. This is the frontier hearth's little joke. To be warm, you may have to taste the smoke. To cook, you may have to cough into your supper. People living with open hearths often endured smoky interiors, especially when chimneys drew poorly or wind pressed downward. A cabin could save you from freezing while slowly perfuming every blanket you owned. The flames settle and begin licking the new wood. You hear a low crack, then a series of tiny ticks inside the log. Sap or trapped moisture pops softly, throwing a brief spark. You watch it land near the hearthstone and fade. A single spark looks harmless, almost pretty, until you remember straw bedding, dry cloth, and walls made of wood. There it is, fire before pride. You rise and move a little away from the hearth, checking what lies nearby. A rag too close to the stones gets nudged back with your boot. A straw bundle is shifted farther from wandering sparks. You hang the damp blanket near warmth, but not so near that it becomes an experiment. Frontier science had enough problems already. A crane or simple hook may hang over the fire, ready for a kettle. If this cabin is modest, the ironware is limited and precious. A pot, a skillet, a poker, perhaps a trivet. Cast iron travelled badly because it was heavy, yet it lasted well enough to justify its weight. That is the sort of calculation frontier life loved to impose. Your dinner pan might be judged against flour, tools, or another pair of boots. You lift the kettle and sniff. Cold metal, old water, smoke. A little sourness lingers, maybe from yesterday's stew. You're not here for luxury, so you accept this with grave politeness. The kettle goes onto the hook, where it swings gently above the flame. Its small creak joins the room's winter music. Outside, the blizzard presses harder. Wind drags along the walls in long, shuddering strokes. The shutter bumps once, twice, then rests. Snow whispers against the threshold. You imagine it piling there, patiently making a second door. The cabin may keep the night out, but the night has impressive persistence. You turn your attention back to the firewood. How much is enough until morning? That is not a poetic question. It is arithmetic wearing mittens. Burn too much early, and you greet dawn with ashes and regret. Burn too little, and sleep becomes a cold negotiation with your own bones. Historians continue to debate how often isolated frontier families face true fuel shortages during severe storms, because diaries often mention hardship only after it became memorable. Ordinary nights passed without record. Terrible nights received ink. The quiet middle is harder to measure. Still, you can feel the problem clearly here. The woodpile does not look endless. You choose a rhythm. One larger log now, smaller pieces later, coals preserved beneath ash when possible. You will not keep a grand blaze all night. You will keep life in the hearth. A frontier fire in a blizzard is not a campfire for storytelling. It is a bank account of heat, and overdrafts are discouraged. A quirky frontier habit comes to mind as you crouch again. Some household carried embers from one place to another in covered containers, guarding live coals like treasure. Matches became more common over time, but they were not always cheap or reliable. Imagine being annoyed because your fire went out, and also because rekindling it required flint, steel, tinder, patience, and a personality upgrade. You stir the embers lightly, not scattering them too far. Ash shifts with the soft, powdery sigh beneath it. Coals glow a deep red, steady and patient. They look almost asleep. You begin to understand why people banked fires at night, covering coals so they would last longer, sleeping flames, sleeping people. One room breathing together. The heat reaches your hands again. Your fingers ache as they thaw, first with relief, then with a prickling, almost pain. Damp wool at your cuffs warms and releases a smell like sheep, smoke, and old rain. It is not pleasant. Exactly. It is honest. Frontier cabins were full of honest smells, which is a polite way to say nobody was lighting lavender candles. You rub your palms together and look at the chimney. It may be built from stone, sticks lined with clay, or a rough mixture of whatever could be made to stand. Early chimneys in some regions could be dangerously flammable, especially when made with wood and clay. The phrase stick and mud chimney sounds charming until you think about it for 3 seconds. Another gust strikes the cabin. Smoke hesitates, then puffs backward from the hearth. You turn your face aside as it drifts through the room. Your eyes water again, and the world blurs amber. For a moment, the cabin feels smaller, the ceiling lower, the storm closer. Then the draft corrects itself, and smoke resumes its climb. You breathe slowly through your nose. The air tastes of ash. There is comfort in the fire's pattern once you accept its demands. It gives you something to do with fear. Feed this, move that, watch here, save wood, warm water, check sparks. Fear spreads when it has no task, but tonight it is being assigned chores. You take one of the smaller sticks and set it near the hearth to dry, not in the flames, not too close, just near enough to lose its dampness. Your movements become slower now, less frantic. The cabin seems to approve of practical gestures. It does not reward drama, but it sometimes rewards order. Light climbs the walls and reveals small details: a peg holding a coat, a patched mitten, a wooden spoon polished by years of use. Soot has darkened the rafters, giving them the colour of old bread crusts. Shadows tremble in the corners, but they no longer feel quite so watchful. Fire rearranges fear into furniture. You think of the people who live this way without calling it an adventure. They did not step into the cabin for a dramatic experiment. They slept here, cooked here, gave birth here, grieved here, patched socks here, and argued about whose turn it was to fetch wood. Survival was not always heroic. Sometimes it was domestic, repetitive, and slightly annoyed. The kettle begins to murmur above the hearth. Not boiling yet, just muttering. That small sound feels luxurious. Warm water means thawed hands, softened food, maybe a sip that does not punish your teeth. You lean toward it and let steam touch your face. It smells metallic and smoky, but it is warmth made visible. The fire is steadier now. You can hear its layers, the low breath of flame, the sharp crackle of twigs, the settling thump of a log shifting inward. Beneath those sounds waits the storm, vast and restless, yet inside. For this little while. You've made an agreement with heat. You add nothing more. Restraint is part of survival. The cabin glows around you, not bright, not safe beyond question, but inhabited. You sit again, close enough to warm your knees, far enough to respect the sparks. Your eyes follow the coals as they pulse and dim, pulse and dim. It is almost like breathing. Perhaps that is why people watched fires for so long before sleep. For now, The blizzard remains outside, the hearth remains alive. Your pride has been folded away with the spare blanket, and your attention has become smaller, wiser, warmer. One night on the frontier is already teaching its quiet lesson. Before you can survive the storm, you must learn to serve the fire. The fire has agreed to live for now, which is generous of it. And you turn from the hearth toward the cabin itself. A frontier cabin during a blizzard is not simply a room. It is a machine made from trees, mud, stone, patience, and occasional optimism. Tonight, you're inside that machine, listening for every loose part. You stand slowly, because warmth has made your knees reluctant. The air changes as soon as you step away from the hearth. Near the flames, your face had almost begun to believe in comfort. 3 paces farther back, winter places a cold hand on your collar and corrects the misunderstanding. The cabin is warmer than outside, but it is not warm everywhere. The walls glow dimly in firelight. Each log has its own twists, knots, and scars, laid horizontally one upon another. In many frontier regions, cabins were often built from notched logs, with corners locked together by saddle, V, or square notching. That basic method helped walls stand without many nails. Trees became structure, and joinery became insurance. You run your fingers along the chinking between 2 logs. It feels dry in one place, crumbly in another, and cold where wind has worried it loose. The mixture might be mud and straw, clay and stones, or moss packed tightly into gaps. A well-chinked wall could soften winter's bite. A neglected wall could whistle like a rude flute. You find the rude flute near the northwest corner. A thin stream of air slides through a crack and touches your wrist. It is astonishing how personal a draught can feel. You press your palm against it and sense the storm moving beyond the wall. Invisible, but determined. Snow scratches there, a faint granular sound, as though the blizzard has tiny claws and poor manners. You look for something to block the gap. A twist of rag will do for now. You take cloth from a peg, fold it twice, and push it gently into the opening with a splintered stick. The draught weakens. Not gone, but humbled. The cabin does not thank you, because cabins are famously reserved. The smell near the wall is different from the hearth. Less smoke, more damp timber, old earth, and wool, somewhere, maybe beneath the lower logs. Moisture has crept in over many seasons. Wood holds history in its grain. It remembers rain, insects, tools, smoke, and the slow pressure of weather. Tonight, it is being asked to remember strength. You move toward the door and examine the threshold. Snow has begun to sift through a narrow gap at the bottom, forming a pale line across the floor. It looks harmless, almost delicate. But every little drift inside means heat leaving, dampness entering, and morning chores becoming more annoying. Frontier life often specialized in small annoyances with serious consequences. You drag the folded blanket lower against the door. It rasps across the boards and releases a sleepy smell of lanolin, smoke, and old bodies. Not charming, perhaps, but useful. Then you wedge another stick against the base. The wind leans hard outside, and the door flexes slightly. You hear the latch answer with a wooden tick. There is a shutter over the window, held by a peg or a latch. It rattles with each gust. Never enough to fail. Just enough to keep you informed. You step close and feel cold radiating from the covered opening. If greased paper or oiled cloth stands in for glass, it lets in weak light but very little protection. The storm taps it softly. 1,000 snowflakes seeking employment indoors. Glass windows on remote frontiers were often expensive luxuries, especially before easy transport reached isolated settlements. Some families use shutters, cloth, scraped hide, or oiled paper to close openings. The result could be dim, drafty, and somewhat dramatic. Of course, drama is less delightful when it arrives at 2 a.m. with frozen fingers. You adjust the shutter peg and press the frame, the rattling lessens. A quieter cabin feels safer. Even if the improvement is mostly emotional, you notice how much survival depends on managing attention. Every sound could mean danger, but every sound cannot receive panic. You must sort the cabin's noises like beans on a table. The roof becomes your next concern. Above you, poles and rafters hold back the weight of snow. Some cabins had roofs made from split wooden shakes, bark, sod, or rough boards. Depending on region and resources, snow adds insulation, which is pleasant, until it adds too much weight, which is less charming. Nature enjoys these little contradictions. A heavy gust shoves across the roof, and something overhead creaks deeply. You pause and look up. The rafters hold. A sprinkle of dust falls from between boards, catching firelight briefly before vanishing. You tell yourself the cabin has made that sound many times. You also tell yourself not to become personally attached to the ceiling. Scholars disagree about how quickly many settlers improved their first cabins, because letters, land records, and later reminiscences do not always match. Some accounts describe crude shelters used for only one season. Others suggest families lived for years in rough cabins while farms slowly developed around them. The truth varies by place, money, labor, weather, and luck. Luck is currently unavailable, so you choose labor. You take a broom made from bundled twigs and gently clear loose snow from just inside the door. The bristles scratch over wood with a dry whisper. It is a humble sound, almost domestic enough to calm you. Sweeping snow during a blizzard feels absurd, like dusting a waterfall. Still, the floor is drier afterward, and that matters. A quirky tidbit comes with the broom itself in some rural households. Brooms were sometimes made from broom corn, birch twigs, or whatever springy plant could be bound together. A fancy imported broom might impress visitors, but a homemade twig broom could do the job while looking like it had survived an argument. Tonight, you respect anything that has survived an argument. You inspect the lower logs again. This is where rot, snowmelt, and drafts begin their patient work. If the cabin rests directly near damp soil, the bottom courses may suffer first. You crouch and smell earth under the floorboards, cold and mineral, mixed with ashes tracked from the hearth. The scent is deep and grounding. It reminds you that the room is only slightly raised above the frozen world. Near one corner, a storage chest sits against the wall. You move it a few inches inward, just enough to check behind it. The wood protests with a low scrape. Behind the chest, a small gap opens between log and chinking. You plug it with moss from a basket, or perhaps a scrap of tow fibre saved for such repairs. Frontier homes were not finished once. They were continually negotiated. Your hands are colder now. The wall has taken warmth from your fingers, and the air bites at your knuckles. You return briefly to the hearth and hold them near the flames. Heat stings back into your skin. The fire smells stronger after your cold walk around the room, rich with resin and ash. You hear the kettle mutter again, like it disapproves of your inspection schedule. The cabin is quieter after your repairs, not silent, never that, but less leaky in voice and breath. The door no longer sighs at the floor. The window shutter has stopped gossiping with the gale. The corner still whispers faintly, but it now whispers in a smaller language. You accept this as progress. You realize that shelter is not a thing you possess. It is something you maintain. Walls do not save you because they exist. They save you because someone cut them, lifted them, sealed them, watched them, and fixed them when weather found their weaknesses. Tonight, that someone is you, which is inconvenient but clarifying. You sit again near the fire, listening differently now. The cabin sounds have become more readable. The roof creak is weight, the wool tick is shrinking timber, the hearth crackle is your small engine of survival. The wind outside remains vast, but the room feels slightly more trustworthy. A drift presses softly against the door, the logs settle, the shutter holds. You breathe in smoke, wool, damp wood, and warm iron around you. The cabin stands in the storm, imperfect and stubborn. You have touched its floors with numb hands, and you have asked it to last until morning, for now. It answers in the only way a frontier cabin can. It stays standing. The cabin is standing, the fire is breathing, and your hands are slowly returning to you. That seems like progress. Then your throat reminds you of another problem. Warmth may be the first hunger of a blizzard night. But water comes close behind it. You swallow, and the dryness scrapes gently. Smoke has done its quiet work. You look toward the kettle, where a little water has begun to steam above the hearth. It is not much. The surface trembles in the dim glow, reflecting the fire in broken copper lines. You lift the lid with 2 fingers and feel damp heat kiss your knuckles. The smell is metallic, smoky, and faintly stale, but still better than thirst. It is strange, almost insulting to worry about water while surrounded by snow. Outside, the world is drowning in frozen whiteness. Yet snow is not easy water. It must be gathered, melted, warmed, and handled without wasting fuel. A winter landscape may look generous, but it charges heavily for every cup. You take the tin cup from the table and pour a little warm water into it. The metal heats quickly, then burns your fingertips just enough to make you switch hands. You sip carefully. The water tastes of smoke and iron, with a ghost of yesterday's cooking. It is not refreshing. It is survival, served lukewarm. Frontier families often depended on wells, springs, streams, rain barrels, or stored water. But winter could complicate all of them. Wells froze at the surface, springs iced over, and outdoor trips became dangerous during heavy storms. Even when water lay nearby, reaching it could demand strength better saved for dawn. This is how nature enjoys technicalities. You glance at the door and imagine stepping outside. The thought alone tightens your shoulders. The snow would hit your face sideways. The wind would steal the warmth from your sleeves. The cabin, imperfect as it is, would become something precious the moment you left it. Finding the well in white darkness might become a very short adventure with a foolish ending. So snow must come to you, or at least almost to you. Near the threshold, powder has sifted into the room, fine and dry. You crouch and scoop a little into the cup. It looks like plenty until you hold it near the fire. Then it shrinks with depressing speed, collapsing into a shallow mouthful. Snow is famously dramatic before it becomes water. You need more. You wrap one hand in cloth and open the door only a crack. The storm immediately tries to enter like an offended relative. Wind pushes snow across your boots, and the fire flickers behind you. The cold has a sound at the doorway, a low rushing hiss filled with flying ice. You reach outside with the cup and scrape snow from the drift pressed against the step. The door slams shut again with your shoulder behind it. For a moment, your heartbeat is louder than the room. Snow clings to your sleeve and melts into dark spots. Your fingertips ache through the cloth. That tiny journey to the threshold has explained several things at once. The well can wait. You set the cup of snow near the hearth, not directly in the flames. Melting snow too fast in a dry pot can scorch the vessel or waste heat. Better to begin with a little water if you have it. Then add snow gradually as it collapses. Someone who lived here would know that without making a speech about technique. Frontier wisdom often looked like ordinary fussiness. The snow sinks into itself, turning glassy around the edges. You add more, then wait. The fire crackles under the kettle. Steam rises in a weak ribbon, vanishing into smoky air. Your damp sleeve begins to warm and gives off the smell of wet wool, ash, and human effort. It is not elegant. It is very real. An odd detail from winter travel comes to mind. Some 19th century guides warned against eating snow directly when thirsty, because it could chill the body and offer little actual liquid. People still did it, naturally, because people have always combined discomfort with poor judgment when desperate. Tonight, you will try not to audition for that tradition. You take another sip from the first cup. Warmth slides down your throat, small but kind. It does not fill you with courage. Exactly. It gives your body permission to continue negotiating. Outside, wind scrapes along the wall, and inside, water forms drop by drop from something that looked abundant. The cabin's air is dry near the fire and damp near the corners. Smoke clings to the ceiling, and your eyes feel gritty. You understand now why thirst grows indoors during winter nights. The hearth warms and dries. Smoke irritates. Cold air sharpens every breath, and fear itself seems to use up moisture. Survival is not only the big things. Sometimes it is noticing your mouth before your thinking goes dull. You look for a proper vessel. A wooden bucket sits near the wall, its iron bands dark with age. You lift it and smell old water, wet wood, and a faint sourness that belongs to many uses. It might once have held water from a spring or well before the storm worsened. Now only a frozen skim remains along the bottom, hard as cloudy glass. Breaking ice indoors feels oddly ceremonial. You tap it with the knife handle until it cracks. The sound is sharp in the cabin's hush. You loosen the pieces and slide them into the kettle. They clink against iron, then begin their slow surrender. The kettle answers with a deeper murmur. Researchers do not always agree on how much water isolated households routinely stored before storms, since evidence comes unevenly from diaries, inventories, and memory. Some families prepared carefully when weather signs appeared. Others were caught between chores, distance, and simple bad luck. A blizzard did not ask whether the bucket had been filled. The smell of melting ice rises clean for a moment, almost fresh beneath the smoke. You breathe it in and feel calmer. Water changes the room's mood. Fire offers urgency, but water offers continuity. You can imagine morning more easily with a kettle warming. You can imagine a meal, tea, softened cornmeal, washed hands, maybe even a face wiped clean of soot. That last idea seems extravagant. You resist drinking too quickly. Warm water is useful, but your supply remains limited by fuel. Every cup has been purchased with firewood. Every added handful of snow asks the hearth for labour. The arithmetic grows clearer as the night deepens. Snow outside, wood inside, heat between them, and you in the middle trying to convert one kind of survival into another. The storm knocks snow against the door again. You picture the drift rising there, packing itself firmly into the seams by dawn. Opening the door may require effort. If the cabin faces the wrong way, the wind may build a wall across it. Many frontier doors opened inward for practical reasons, including snow blockage, though construction varied widely by region and habit. Tonight, inward opening seems less like design and more like mercy. You pour melted water into the tin cup and hold it with both hands. The cup's warmth spreads into your palms. Steam brushes your face. The first swallow tastes better than before, perhaps because you worked for it. Smoke still lingers, and iron still speaks through the metal, but the water has become yours. For a while, you sit without moving much. The kettle keeps muttering. The fire keeps working. Snow becomes water, slowly and stubbornly, as though performing a lesson in patience. You listen to the hiss outside and the quieter hiss within. Where drops meet hot iron and vanish, you begin to understand that the blizzard's abundance is misleading. Everything necessary is present, yet nothing is simple. There is wood, but it must be conserved. There is shelter, but it must be repaired. There is snow, but it must be transformed. The frontier does not always deny you what you need. Sometimes it places what you need just beyond easy reach. You set the cup down and cover the bucket with a scrap of cloth, hoping to keep ash away. Tiny practical gesture, almost tender. Then you add one more handful of snow to the kettle, watching it soften at the edges. The room smells of smoke, damp wool, warmed metal, a melting winter. Outside, the whole world is frozen water. Inside, you have earned a cup. The kettle has given you water. And now the cabin asks the next quiet question. What will you eat, here in this one-room world? While the storm presses its cold face against the walls, hunger is not sharp yet. It is only beginning to wake, stretching somewhere beneath your ribs with sleepy determination. Still, you know better than to ignore it. You look toward the shelf near the hearth. It holds a few plain things, each one more valuable than it first appears. A small sack of cornmeal, a twist of salt, a strip of dried meat wrapped in cloth, perhaps a little flour, some beans, or a heel of hard bread that could threaten a tooth if approached unwisely. Nothing here is decorative. Supper has no time for vanity. The firelight makes every object look older and more important. The cornmeal sack gives off a dusty, faintly sweet smell when you open it. The dried meat smells smoky, salty, and stubborn. You touch it with your fingers, and it feels stiff as bark. This is food designed not for delight, but endurance. It is the edible version of crossed arms. On many frontiers, preserved foods carried households through winter and distance. Salt pork, dried beans, cornmeal, flour, smoked meat, dried apples, and preserved vegetables appeared often where families could obtain or prepare them. Fresh food might vanish for months, especially during severe weather. Variety was welcome, but calories were the main negotiator. You pour a small measure of cornmeal into the cup, then tip it into the kettle, not too much. The water clouds and thickens as you stir with a wooden spoon. The spoon is worn smooth where many hands have held it, and its bowl is darkened by heat. It makes a soft scraping sound against iron, steady and domestic. The smell changes as the meal warms. Smoke remains, of course, because smoke has made itself a member of the household. But now there is also the plain, comforting scent of hot grain. It rises gently, almost shyly, into the room. Your stomach notices at once. Apparently it has been listening. You cut a narrow shaving from the dried meat. The knife resists at first, then slides through with a leathery pull. A few scraps drop into the thickening meal. They darken as they soften. Salt will spread through the pot, lending flavour and, more importantly, reminding the body that someone thought ahead before winter became theatrical. A curious old household habit comes to mind as you stir. Some families saved dripping fat so carefully that a spoonful could flavour an entire pot. Grease a pan, or enrich bread dough. The scraps of fat in a crock might look humble, but they were culinary treasure. Imagine guarding bacon grease with the seriousness of a banker protecting gold. Honestly, the banker might have been less useful. The storm pushes against the cabin again. The shutter rattles once, then settles. Your spoon keeps circling. The motion is soothing, though your arm soon feels the effort. Thick porridge has its own ideas about resistance. It bubbles softly, making little plops that sound almost cheerful. Food cooking in a winter cabin changes everything. It suggests that the night can be managed. You think of the labour behind this meal. Corn had to be planted, tended, harvested, dried and ground. Meat had to be butchered, salted, smoked, guarded from spoilage, and hidden from pests. Even the salt itself may have travelled a long way by cart, boat, or pack animal. A spoonful of supper contains roads, weather, trade, sweat, and memory. There is an ongoing debate among historians about how monotonous frontier diets really were, because surviving accounts often swing between complaint and nostalgia. Some writers remembered abundance, especially after farms matured. Others described lean months, spoiled stores, or meals repeated until appetite surrendered. The answer depends on region, season, wealth, harvest, and how honest the storyteller felt. Tonight, your storyteller is the kettle. You lift the spoon and let the mixture fall back in a slow ribbon. It is not graceful, but it is ready enough. You add a pinch of salt, careful not to waste even those few crystals. Salt touches your fingertips like tiny stones. The meal smells warmer now, with the dried meat waking inside it. Not a feast, a truce. You search for a bowl and find a wooden one near the shelf. Its surface is nicked, stained, and slightly uneven. You wipe it with a cloth that may or may not improve the situation. Then you ladle the thick meal into it. Steam rises and fogs your face. For a moment, the cabin feels almost gentle. You sit close to the hearth, bowl in both hands. The heat seeps through the wood, then into your palms. Your first bite is too hot, because patience has apparently gone outside with the well bucket. You breathe through your mouth and wait. The flavour is simple grain, smoke, salt, meat, iron, and hunger. Hunger improves many recipes. It may be the oldest seasoning. The texture is coarse and thick, clinging to the spoon. Small softened bits of meat release bursts of salt. The cornmeal fills the mouth and warms the throat. You eat slowly, not from manners alone, but because the bowl must last. In a cabin like this, fast eating feels reckless. Supper is not an event. It is a measured ration of courage. Beyond the fire's glow, the walls seem to lean inward slightly, though of course they do not. The storm makes enclosed spaces feel more enclosed. You listen while you chew. Wind, roof creak, fire crackle, kettle murmur, spoon scrape. The sounds gather around you in layers. They make a kind of lullaby. If the singer has rough hands and poor dental care, a faint smell of singed grain reaches you. You stir the kettle quickly before the bottom catches too much. Scorched porridge would still be eaten, naturally. But bitterness is best avoided when morale is this fragile. The spoon scrapes harder, lifting a sticky layer from the iron. The sound is unpleasant and useful. Many frontier meals were saved from ruin by the humble act of paying attention. You think about the absence of sweetness. No fresh milk, no butter unless luck has been very kind. No fruit unless dried stores remain. A bit of molasses would feel luxurious. A preserved apple slice might become a family event. Food history often reminds you that pleasure and survival were not separate categories. A sweet mouthful in winter could brighten an entire evening. Perhaps there is a little dried apple hidden in the chest. Perhaps not. You decide not to search yet. Hope should also be rationed. The bowl warms your lap, and your shoulders loosen. Heat from food spreads differently than heat from fire. The hearth warms your skin from outside, but supper sends a quiet flame inward. Your thoughts slow a little. The blizzard still surrounds you. Yet hunger has stopped tugging at your attention. One need, at least, has been answered. You scrape the bowl clean with care. No spoonful should be wasted. A smear of meal clings to the wood, and you chase it patiently. This is not greed. It is respect for the work that brought it here. Frontier households understood leftovers differently when every stored thing had a season behind it. Waste was not merely careless. It was almost rude to the dead tree, tired animal, and aching farmer alike. You pour a little warm water into the bowl and swirl it, making a thin broth from what remains. It tastes smoky and faintly salted. You drink it anyway, and it is surprisingly satisfying. The bowl is cleaner now, your stomach steadier. Outside, snow continues its blind labour against the door. You set the bowl near the hearth to dry. The wooden spoon rests beside it, dark and ordinary, a small tool that has done noble work without requesting applause. The cabin smells now of cooked grain, smoke, damp wool, and thawing wood. It is not a pleasant smell by modern standards. It is better than emptiness. You lean back against the wall, feeling the log's cold curve through your clothing. Supper from scarcity has taught you the shape of the night. Nothing comes easily, but enough may be possible. The fire must last. The water must stretch. The food must warm more than the belly. You listen to the blizzard and let the last taste of salt fade on your tongue. The meal was plain, almost severe. But it has joined you to the people who once endured such nights without naming them remarkable. They cooked, ate, cleaned, and carried on in the orange hush of the cabin. That feels less like hardship than quiet skill. The storm can keep shouting, "You have had supper." After supper, the cabin grows more alert, or perhaps you do. Hunger has quieted. Warmth has gathered near the hearth, and the first urgency of arrival has passed. That is when the night begins speaking more clearly. You sit with your back near the wall, bowl drying by the fire, and listen beyond the timber. The wind does not make one sound, it has layers. There is the high thin whine at the window covering, the deep rush along the roof, and the sudden shove against the door. Beneath those voices, snow whispers steadily against the logs. It sounds almost soft, almost harmless, which is a clever performance from weather currently trying to bury your exit. Inside, smaller sounds answer, the fire clicks, the kettle settles. A roof pole gives a slow wooden complaint as the cold tightens it. Somewhere near the food shelf, the mouse resumes its important frontier administration. You hear a tiny scratch, then silence. Even the mouse understands that dramatic timing matters. In cabins like this, sound carried information. Families listen for livestock shifting outside, chimney drafts changing, wolves or coyotes calling, trees cracking under cold, and travellers trying to reach shelter on open frontiers where neighbours might live far apart. The ear became a practical tool. You did not merely hear the night, you inspected it. A gust slams snow against the shutter with a muffled slap. You flinch, then feel slightly silly. The shutter holds. The cabin returns to its low breathing. You remind yourself that fear often borrows ordinary noises and dresses them in expensive costumes. Still, in a blizzard, even ordinary noises deserve respect. You lean closer to the wall and press your palm against the log. The wood feels cold, rough, and faintly damp where your breath has warmed the room. Through it comes vibration, not sound exactly, more like pressure. The storm is outside, but it is also travelling through the structure. The cabin becomes an instrument, and winter plays it without asking permission. The smell has changed again. Supper lingers beneath smoke, making the air richer and heavier. Damp wool hangs near the hearth, steaming faintly. Ash gives everything a dry bitterness in one corner. Old leather and stored tools release a darker scent. The room is a bundle of work smells, all warmed just enough to introduce themselves. You listen for animals, if there is a cow, horse, goat, or mule nearby. It may be sheltered in a shed or rough barn. It may also be huddled against a windbreak. Because frontier arrangements were not always ideal, livestock were wealth, labour, milk, transport, and future meals. Losing an animal to weather could change a family's whole season. Nothing clear reaches you from outside, no lowing, no stamping, no bell. The storm swallows distance greedily. You imagine a barn only yards away, invisible behind the snow. You imagine animals shifting in straw, noses steaming, bodies turned away from the wind. Their world is also reduced to warmth, shelter, and waiting. There is an old bit of rural wisdom about animals sensing weather before humans admit it. Some people watch cows lie down, birds feed heavily, or dogs grow restless before storms. Not every sign was reliable. Of course, because cows also lie down for reasons known only to cows. But close observation mattered, and farmers learned patterns from repeated seasons. The fire pops sharply, sending a spark against the hearthstone. You turn, watching it fade. That one bright sound changes the room's mood for a second, like a whispered warning. You shift the nearby kindling farther away. Your movements are slower now, more economical. The cabin has trained you in caution without ever raising its voice. The outside calls return. A long moan sweeps down the chimney, and smoke trembles backward before rising again. The note is almost human. Not quite, but almost enough. You understand why people filled lonely nights with stories. A wind that sounds like a voice will eventually be given a personality, especially by someone cold, tired, and under-caffeinated by several centuries. Some scholars remain unsure how often frightening frontier tales reflected direct experience rather than later exaggeration. Because oral stories changed each time they were retold. A lone howl might become a pack. A strange knock might become a warning spirit. Yet the emotional truth is easy to feel here. Isolation invites imagination to sit beside the fire. You pull the blanket closer around your shoulders. Its wool scratches your neck and smells strongly of smoke. Underneath, your clothing feels clammy where melted snow touched it earlier. The touch is uncomfortable, but the pressure of the blanket helps. Weight can be soothing, even when the fabric has the personality of a sheep with complaints. The mouse scratches again. This time, you speak softly toward the shelf. Not tonight. Friend, your voice sounds strange in the room, too modern and too lonely. The mouse ignores you, which is historically plausible. Frontier grain stores were constantly threatened by rodents, insects, damp, and mold. Food protection was not a side chore, it was a campaign. You rise and check the sack of cornmeal. The cloth is tied well enough, but you move it higher on the shelf. Your fingers brush spilled grains, gritty and dry. You sweep them into your palm and toss them into the fire, where they vanish with tiny dark flecks. Waste bothers you now. Even in grains too few to matter, the night has narrowed your values. A sound comes from the roof, sudden and heavy, snow sliding, perhaps. You freeze and look upward. A soft thump follows outside the wall, then a powdery rush. The roof has shed part of its load. That may be good. It may also mean the wind has shifted and carved drift unevenly. The cabin offers no report. Only another creak. You breathe out slowly. Your breath appears in a faint cloud beyond the fire's reach. That little ghost of warmth reminds you how cold the room remains. Sound, smell, touch, air, light. All of them keep proving the same thing. Shelter is partial. Life continues in the portions you can defend. You return to the hearth and sit with your knees drawn close. The flames are lower now, and the coals glow deep beneath the log. You do not add wood yet. You wait. The waiting itself becomes a task, and tasks are helpful. A restless person wastes fuel. A patient one saves morning. Outside, something cries faintly. It might be the wind bending around a corner. It might be an animal. It might be your tired mind stitching sound into meaning. You listen hard. But the noise does not return. The silence afterward feels thick, lined with snow. You decide not to name it. Naming can wait. You think of neighbours scattered across miles, each cabin perhaps holding its own little fire and listening family. Someone may be telling children not to worry. Someone may be checking a newborn calf. Someone may be lying awake beside a sick spouse, counting gusts instead of sheep. The frontier is often imagined as empty, but the night contains many small centres of endurance. The storm speaks again, softer now, as if it has moved a little farther from the wall. Snow still brushes the shutter. The hearth still whispers. Your ears begin sorting the noises into familiar places: door, roof, wall, fire, kettle, mouse, wind. The unknown shrinks when given a pattern, though it never disappears completely. You lean your head back against the log and feel its chill through the blanket. Your eyelids grow heavier, then lift each time the shutter clicks. Sleep may come later in scraps. For now, you're learning the cabin's language. It is not gentle, but it is understandable. The night continues beyond the walls, wide and white and moving. Inside, you sit within a circle of orange light, breathing smoke, wool, grain, and cold wood. Every sound asks for attention. Not every sound receives fear. That may be enough for this hour. The sounds of the cabin have begun arranging themselves into a pattern, and your body takes this as permission to remember fatigue. It arrives slowly at first, then with the quiet authority of snow piling against a door. Your shoulders feel heavy, your eyelids lower between gusts. The firelight trembles along the wall, and the room seems to breathe around you. Now comes the problem of sleeping. On a frontier night like this, sleep is not simply lying down and hoping for kindness. It is planning. It is insulation. It is distance from drafts, sparks, damp floors, and whatever small creature is currently overestimating its rights near the cornmeal. Rest must be built, almost like the cabin itself. You look toward the bedstead. It is low, plain, and practical, with rope or wooden slats supporting a ticking mattress. If straw, corn husks, hay, or feathers fill it. The quality depends on luck and labour. A bed could be soft enough to welcome you, or lumpy enough to explain several family arguments. Tonight, you are not judging, you are negotiating. Many frontier households used rope beds, straw ticks, quilts, wool blankets, hides, and shared body heat to survive cold nights. Bedding was not casual comfort, it was household technology, made through spinning, weaving, quilting, hunting, trading, mending, and endless washing when weather allowed. A quilt was warmth, labour, memory, and geometry stitched together. You touch the mattress. It crackles faintly beneath your hand. Dry stems shifting inside the ticking. The fabric feels coarse and cold. When you press down, the filling flattens, then rises unevenly, as if offended. You decide it will do. The phrase "it will do" may be the true anthem of frontier life. The bed is close enough to the hearth to catch warmth, but not so close that a spark might visit. That balance matters. Too far from the fire, and cold gathers under the blanket like water in a ditch. Too near, and sleep becomes a risky partnership with flying embers. You move the stool, clear the floor, and inspect the space carefully. A small ember pops from the hearth and lands harmlessly on stone. You watch it die before continuing. The fire has been helpful, but helpful things can still burn down your evening. You push loose straw farther back and smooth the bedding with both hands. It smells of dry grass, old cloth, smoke, and the faint animal scent of hide stored too long indoors. You find a quilt folded inside the chest. Its patches are irregular, made from worn garments, leftover cloth, and pieces that once belonged to other uses. You spread it over the bed and feel the thickness under your fingers. It's not fluffy in the modern sense. It is dense, serious, and full of small repairs. Every stitch seems to say that warmth was expensive. There is a practical beauty in it. Some surviving quilts and coverlets became family records, even when nobody meant them as art. A scrap from a dress, a shirt, or a child's outgrown clothing might remain visible for decades. Later collectors sometimes turned these objects into symbols of pioneer romance. The people making them were probably thinking more about cold feet than heritage. History can be sentimental after the laundry is done. You add a hide over the quilt, fur side inward. It carries a smell of smoke, leather, and wild weather. The texture is uneven under your palm, soft in places and stiff near the edges. It may have come from deer, buffalo, bear, or sheep, depending on region and circumstance, whatever its source. Tonight it has one job: keep warmth near the body. You consider the floor, cold rises from it, though technically the ground is simply stealing heat downward. Packed earth floors and rough plank floors both had drawbacks, especially in winter. A floor might be swept clean and still feel damp, hard, and merciless. If this bed keeps you even a little above it, that is a victory worth accepting without too much ceremony. You remove your outer layer and regret it immediately. Cold air touches the damp places on your clothing. Your skin tightens across your shoulders. You work quickly, hanging the wettest garment near the hearth but safely aside. The cloth releases steam and a smell like wool, smoke, melted snow, and weary humanity. Not heavenly, entirely useful. You keep on several layers. Sleeping fully undressed in this cabin would be a bold artistic statement, followed by shivering. Frontier people often slept in shifts, socks, caps, petticoats, shirts, wrappers, or whatever could preserve heat without tangling too badly. Nightclothes were not about elegance during a storm. They were about waking with toes still committed to the enterprise. You wrap a cloth around your neck and pull a cap low over your ears. The cap is plain wool, itchy enough to keep you humble. You tuck the quilt under the mattress edge to trap warm air. Then you test the bed with one knee. Straw rustles, the rope or slats creak. Nothing collapses, which is a generous beginning. A question troubles historians when reconstructing nights like this: how warm were cabins actually kept during severe winter weather? Thermometers were not always present, and personal descriptions vary wildly. One person's tolerable chill might be another person's misery. The evidence suggests wide differences shaped by fuel, construction, health, clothing, and the stubbornness of whoever controlled the hearth. Tonight, your toes vote for misery with amendments. You slide under the layers and feel them settle over you. At first, everything is cold: the quilt, the mattress, the hide. Even the air trapped underneath seems to have winter opinions. You hold still and let your body begin the slow work of warming its nest. After a minute, small pockets of heat gather at your knees and elbows. Then they spread. The bed smells stronger now that you're inside it. Straw, smoke, wool, leather, and your own damp clothing blend into one close atmosphere. It is not unpleasant once you stop expecting freshness. Freshness belongs outside, where it is currently trying to kill you, indoors. Stale warmth is a blessing with poor manners. You lie facing the fire. The room looks lower from here, more intimate and more shadowed. Flames move behind the hearth tools, and the kettle hangs like a dark moon. The roof creaks softly above. Wind strokes the wall in long waves. The sounds you learned earlier return. but from the bed they seem farther away, not gone, just softened. You keep one arm outside the quilt for a moment, reaching toward the warmth. Cold finds your wrist quickly, so you retreat. The blanket seals around you again. Your breath warms the space near your chin. You feel the scratch of wool at your cheek and the steady pressure of the hide across your legs. Weight, warmth, darkness, waiting. A little humour survives in you, barely. You imagine a future person admiring the simple life while standing in a heated gift shop beside a decorative butter churn. You wish them well, of course. You also wish them one authentic draft across the ankle, purely for educational balance. The fire lowers another inch. You do not rise yet, it is too soon, and the coals are strong. Instead, you watch the red centre breathe under ash. That banked glow is the night's clock, not precise, but persuasive. When it dims too far, you'll have to leave the bed and serve it again. For now, you let yourself rest. The cabin continues its work around you. Chinking holds in the repaired corner. The shutter taps softly but does not open. The door remains braced against the drift. Your bowl dries near the hearth. Your cup waits beside the kettle. Everything important is close enough to reach, which feels wise in a room where darkness thickens between objects. Sleep approaches cautiously. It does not rush into a frontier cabin. It peers around the doorway, checks the roof, sniffs the smoke, and asks whether the fire is behaving. You meet it halfway, breathing slowly through the dry air. Your body loosens into the straw mattress. The prickling in your thawed fingers fades. Outside, the blizzard still moves across the land, erasing fences, paths, tracks, and distance. Inside, beneath patched cloth and borrowed animal warmth, you become another small shape in the cabin's keeping, not perfectly safe, not deeply comfortable, but warmer than before. The bed rustles when you shift. The wind answers. The fire whispers. For a few precious minutes. That is enough. For a while. Sleep takes you in small pieces. Not a deep sleep. Not the generous kind that carries a person across whole oceans of night. This is frontier sleep. Lighter and more suspicious. You drift. Surface. Drift again. While wind worries the walls and the bed's straw ticking murmurs beneath your shoulder, then something changes. At first, you do not know what has woken you. The cabin is still dark, still close, still breathing smoke and cold wood. Your eyes open to a low red glow in the hearth. No flame stands there now, only coals sleeping under ash, pulsing faintly like buried rubies. The room has cooled around them. You feel it before you think it. Cold has crept beneath the quilt and found your back. Your nose is chilled, your fingers stiff, and your breath gathers in a pale cloud near your face. The hide over your legs still holds some warmth, but the edges of the bed have gone sharp with night. The fire needs you. You lie still for one more breath, hoping perhaps the hearth will solve itself. It does not. Fire, like most useful things, has no interest in your feelings. You push the quilt back and immediately regret every decision that led to this moment. The air touches your warmed body like icy cloth. You sit up slowly, teeth clenched, trying not to wake the whole cabin, as if the cabin is not already awake. The floor is cold through your socks. You reach for your boots and slide your feet into them without fully standing. The leather is stiff and mean at first, then your weight softens it slightly. You pull the blanket around your shoulders and shuffle toward the hearth. wrapped like a tired frontier ghost with practical concerns. Keeping a fire alive overnight was a familiar duty in many households before reliable stoves, central heating, and easy matches changed domestic routines. People banked coals with ash, rose to add fuel, or coaxed embers back at dawn. A fire going out could mean more than discomfort. It could mean labour, delay, and real danger in bitter weather. You kneel near the hearth and hold your hands over the coals. The heat is faint but alive. Ash covers the surface in a pale grey crust, soft as powder. You take the poker and gently open a channel through it. The coals brighten where air reaches them, red deepening into orange. A thread of smoke rises with the smell of charred wood and old resin. It is a quiet little resurrection. You choose kindling from the sticks you set near the hearth earlier. They're drier now, warmed by patient nearness. This pleases you more than it should. Small preparations become gifts to your future self, especially when that future self is kneeling half awake beside a winter fire at an unpleasant hour. You lay the smaller sticks across the coals, leaving space between them. A few shavings follow, curled and dry. The first shaving blackens, then catches. A tiny flame appears, bends, nearly vanishes, then steadies. You lean closer and blow gently, not too hard. The coal bed glows brighter, and the flame climbs with a soft, eager sound. Your face warms first. Your knees remain cold. That seems fair, if not ideal. The cabin emerges by degrees. The kettle becomes a dark shape hanging over the hearth. The stool appears beside you. The patched quilt on the bed forms a low mound behind your shoulder. Shadows climb the wall as the flame grows, and the roof beams return from darkness one by one. A room can feel reborn when fire remembers its work. A strange historical detail comes to mind in the wavering light. In some households, live coals were sometimes shared with neighbours when a fire failed, carried carefully in pans, pots, or covered vessels. This sounds neighbourly and charming until you imagine walking through snow with burning embers while trying not to trip. Community. Yes, but with sparks. You add a small split log, not one of the largest. The wood settles with a hollow clunk. For a few moments, smoke thickens and wanders sideways. You turn your head and blink through the sting. The smell scratches your throat, bitter and dry. Then the chimney begins drawing again, and the smoke lifts, climbing into the dark. Researchers differ on how consistently frontier sleepers woke to 10 fires, partly because diaries rarely record every ordinary interruption. People wrote about storms, illness, births, deaths, and disasters. They did not always write, woke cold, cursed silently, added wood. Yet that unrecorded sentence probably belonged to countless winter nights. You sit back on your heels, waiting until the log catches properly. The room is still colder than before, but the trend has improved. That matters. Survival often depends less on comfort than direction. Worse or better, losing heat or gaining it. Panic or task. Tonight, you live by these small measurements. The wind drops suddenly outside, and the silence expands. For a few breaths, you hear only the fire's thin crackle and your own breathing. Then the blizzard returns with a long sweeping rush, dragging snow across the roof. The shutter rattles once. The door gives a low wooden sound beneath the drift. You look toward it, but do not rise. The brace still holds. You take the kettle hook carefully and swing it a little closer to the flame. The water inside is cold, but not frozen. You count that as a victory. A sip would help, though drinking too much means leaving the bed again later for reasons even less poetic. Frontier decisions do not always uplift the soul. Still, your throat is dry. You pour a mouthful into the tin cup and warm it near the fire before drinking. The water tastes smoky and flat. It is wonderful. It slides down with the gentle heat, clearing ash from your throat. You hold the cup between your palms until the metal cools. The fire begins to speak more confidently. Twigs crackle, the log sighs, and a narrow flame curls along one edge. You add nothing else. The goal is not brightness. The goal is endurance. A large blaze would warm the room quickly and empty the wood pile foolishly. A careful fire can carry you toward morning with less drama, and drama has already applied for several positions tonight. You glance at the wood stack. It looks smaller than it did before sleep. Perhaps it truly is, or perhaps the night has sharpened your accounting. Either way, you make a promise to be stingy, on the frontier. Fuel was not an abstract resource. It was hours with an axe, numb fingers, aching shoulders, and sledges or arms hauling weight through cold. Your blanket slips from one shoulder, and the room touches your neck. You pull it back quickly. Enough education. For a moment. You remain seated near the hearth, letting warmth build around your legs. The bed waits behind you, darker now, but still holding the shape of your body. Returning will be unpleasant at first, then better. Leaving the hearth feels foolish, but staying upright all night would spend your strength. The body also needs fuel, and sleep is one kind. You take the poker and draw ash gently around the edges of the fire, sheltering the coals without smothering the flame. It is a delicate act, humble and exact. You're not commanding fire. You're arranging conditions under which fire may continue to cooperate. There is a lesson there, but it is too cold for philosophy. The flame steadies. The log catches along its underside. The ash bed glows warm beneath. You watch for another minute, counting breaths instead of seconds. The storm outside keeps its own time, wild and unhelpful. Inside, you follow the slower clock of embers. At last, you stand and cross back to the bed. The floor creaks beneath you. The quilt lifts, and a pocket of saved warmth greets you with surprising kindness. You slide in carefully, tucking the edges under your legs and around your shoulders. The bed crackles softly, accepting you back. From here, the fire is smaller but brighter than before. It throws a gentle light over the table, the cup, the closed door, and the repaired corner where your rag holds against the draught. You feel proud of that rag. Not loudly proud, frontier proud, which is mostly relief wearing a plain coat. Your eyes close. They open once more to check the hearth. Flame, coal, smoke rising, no sparks loose. Good. The midnight watch has passed for now. You have left the warm bed, served the fire, saved the coals, sipped the smoke-touched water, and returned with your courage only mildly offended. The blizzard still owns the dark fields outside, yet inside this rough room, a smaller power keeps glowing. You listen to it breathe. The fire breathes steadily again, and you drift near sleep without falling fully into it. The cabin holds you in that strange middle place where thoughts soften. Sounds grow larger, and shadows begin to behave with unnecessary confidence. The storm has not weakened. It has only become familiar enough to feel almost personal. You open your eyes and watch the wall opposite the hearth. Firelight moves across the logs in slow orange bands, making knots seem like half-closed eyes. A hanging coat sways slightly in the draught, though no person touches it, near the shelf. The mouse makes one precise scratch and then vanishes into silence. It has excellent timing and no respect. This is the hour when practical fear and imagination begin sharing a bench. You know the shutter is only rattling because of wind. You know the roof creaks because timber tightens in cold. You know the coat is not watching you, still. Knowledge and nerves are not always close friends. Sometimes they nod politely across the room. Frontier families often carried folk beliefs from older homes into new landscapes. Settlers brought charms, weather signs, ghost stories, religious warnings, and healing customs from Europe, Africa, indigenous neighbours, and regional traditions. These beliefs did not replace practicality. They often sat beside it, like another tool on the shelf. You pull the quilt higher and let that thought settle. In a lonely cabin, superstition is not merely foolishness wearing a shawl. It can be a way of organising fear. A creak becomes a warning. A dream becomes a message. An animal's call becomes a sign. The mind dislikes emptiness, so it stitches meanings into the dark. The wind lowers into a long moan down the chimney. Smoke stirs and briefly turns the air bitter. The sound resembles a human voice just enough to be impolite. You look toward the hearth, where flame bends and straightens. Nothing enters. Nothing changes. The room is the same, except your heartbeat has decided to contribute percussion. There is an old custom, found in several rural traditions, of treating the hearth as the moral centre of the home. People might bless it, guard it, avoid sweeping ashes out at unlucky times, or read signs in flames. Such habits varied widely, and not everyone believed them. Yet you can understand the impulse. When fire keeps you alive, it becomes easy to respect it beyond reason. A spark flares suddenly and snaps in the firebox. You blink. The room answers with a brief dance of shadows on the ceiling. One rafter casts a long shape like a bent arm. Then the flame settles, and the arm becomes timber again. The transformation feels faintly embarrassing, as though you have been fooled by furniture. You think of stories told by lamplight after chores, tales of lost travellers, strange lights over marshland, knocks on empty walls, or cries heard before a death. Some came from true danger, some from grief, and some from winter nights needing entertainment. When children asked for another story, adults probably obliged, then wondered why nobody slept. The cabin gives another sound. 3 knocks, spaced oddly from the far wall. You hold still beneath the quilt. 1. Then a pause, then 2 more. The wind has shifted a branch. Perhaps, or ice has dropped from the eaves. There are reasonable explanations. Reasonable explanations are lovely. They do not always arrive first. You count your breaths. The knocking does not return. Snow continues to sift along the wall, making its dry whisper. The repaired corner holds. You remember pressing the rag into the gap. A tiny act against an enormous night. That memory steadies you. A known task is stronger than an unknown sound. Writers and historians remain divided about how to interpret supernatural references in frontier accounts. Some read them as sincere belief, some as literary decoration, and some as coded ways to describe stress, illness, isolation, or danger? The evidence rarely lets one answer cover every story. Human fear is not tidy enough for that. You turn carefully on the mattress, and the straw crackles beneath you. The smell of bedding rises close to your face. Dry husks, smoke, hide, wool, and faint damp cloth. Outside the quilt, the air touches your nose with icy patience. Inside it, warmth has gathered around your chest and knees. The contrast is intimate, almost tender. Another little piece of folklore wanders into your thoughts. Some people believed a candle burning blue meant spirits were near, though a draught, fuel impurity, or wick problem could be less dramatic explanations. A frontier cabin did not always have candles to spare, which must have limited ghostly lighting design. Even the supernatural had to respect household budgets. You almost smile at that. The firelight shrinks and swells. It paints the kettle, the cup, the stool, and the door bar in soft changing gold. The door itself looks firm, braced against the snowbank outside. Earlier, that door seemed like the thinnest line in the world. Now it looks almost loyal. You've checked it, wedged it, trusted it, and listened to it complain. The storm makes a sudden high cry around the window covering. Your skin prickles under the quilt. That sound is harder to place. It may be wind slipping through a narrow seam, or the shutter peg vibrating against wood. You imagine a child hearing such a noise and being told it was only the weather. You also imagine the child not believing a word. And honestly, fair. You breathe in through your nose and out slowly. The air tastes of smoke and warm grain, a remnant of supper still holding in the room. That taste helps bring you back to the practical world. You ate, you drank, you tended the fire, you inspected the walls. You're not helpless in a tale. You're a person with chores, which is less glamorous but more useful. On many frontiers, religious belief shaped how people understood storms and survival. Blizzards could be read as divine trial, natural hazard, seasonal fact, or all three together. A family might pray, repair a roof, bank a fire, and tell a ghost story within the same evening. Human beings rarely choose only one way to face the dark. You listen again for animals, nothing distinct. The wind carries no bell, no hoof, no human call for a moment. You imagine someone outside, lost in the white distance, seeing your cabin's faint glow through snow. The thought is painful and powerful. A fire in a window could mean rescue. A missed light could mean silence. You push the thought away gently. Tonight, the cabin holds only you, the fire, the mouse, and the weather's endless performance. That is enough company. Perhaps too much, if the mouse files another complaint. The darkest part of night feels different from evening. Evening belongs to tasks, but midnight belongs to meanings. Every object seems to carry an extra layer. The quilt becomes lineage. The fire becomes promise. The door becomes boundary. The storm becomes a question old enough to predate. Every map can shelter, hold. You do not answer with words. You answer by staying warm. The hearth gives a soft collapse as one charred piece settles inward. Coals brighten beneath it, red and steady. You watch their colour through half-closed eyes. Fire is the best storyteller in the room, but it repeats itself in ways that soothe rather than irritate. Glow, fade, crackle, breathe, again and again. The strange knocks do not return. The coat stops swaying. The chimney moan lowers into an ordinary draught. Fear. Once given time and no encouragement. becomes tired. It sits down beside you and grows smaller. You do not conquer it. You outweight it under a quilt. Sleep approaches again. Slower than before, it steps round the stories, the signs, the remembered warnings, and the half-shaped faces in the knots. You let the cabin remain mysterious without needing it to become magical. Some things are wind, some things are wood, some things are simply what tired minds make from darkness. The fire glows, the walls hold, the snow keeps speaking. You listen, and you do not name everything. The strange hour of shadows has softened, leaving you with a more ordinary enemy. Supplies. There is nothing ghostly about a shrinking wood pile, a low candle, or a food sack tied too loosely against mice. These things do not moan in the chimney, they simply wait to disappoint you. You open your eyes again and study the room from the bed. The fire remains alive, though quieter now, its glow tucked under ash and charred wood. The kettle hangs near it, dark and patient. The repaired corner still holds against the draught. The door is braced, the shutter is closed. For the moment, the cabin is doing its work. Now you must count what is left. You slide from the bedding slowly, careful to keep the quilt wrapped around your shoulders until the last possible second. The air bites your cheeks and fingers. Your boots wait beside the bed. Colder than seems reasonable for objects indoors, you put them on, stand, and feel the room tilt briefly with fatigue. Sleep in fragments leaves the body strangely hollow. The first inventory is fuel. You move to the wood stacked along the wall and kneel beside it. Larger logs lie at the bottom, smaller split pieces and kindling above. Each piece looks different now than it did earlier, before. The wood pile was background, now it is a clock, a pantry, and a promise with splinters. On many farms and homesteads, winter fuel preparation began long before storms arrived. Wood had to be cut during safer weather, hauled, split, and protected from damp. In prairie regions with few trees, people might burn twisted hay, dried manure, coal, or anything that produced usable heat. The form varied, but the problem remained. Heat needed storage. You touch the remaining pieces and make a rough count. Perhaps enough until dawn if you behave. Not enough for waste. Not enough for panic. Enough for a patient person who understands that a blaze is not the same as survival. You choose one medium log and leave it near the hearth to warm before it is needed. Your fingers come away dusty with bark and frozen dirt. The texture clings under your nails. You rub them together near the fire, and a dry wooden smell rises. It mingles with smoke, wet wool, and stale supper. The cabin's atmosphere has grown thick with the night's work. It smells less like a room now, and more like evidence. Next, light. A candle stub rests on the table, short, bent, and cloudy with cold. Beside it lies a simple holder and a twist of rag that might serve as a wick in grease. You do not light either. Firelight is enough for now. Candles were useful, but they were never unlimited. Burning one for reassurance would feel pleasant for 10 minutes and foolish afterward. Before kerosene lamps became widespread, households often relied on tallow candles, rushlights, grease lamps, pine knots, or hearth light. Each had drawbacks. Tallow could smell unpleasant. Rushlights burned quickly, and open flame always carried risk. Darkness was not merely absence, it was the normal condition after sunset, interrupted carefully and expensively. You lift the candle and sniff it. It carries a faint animal fat smell, waxy and sour, not charming, but effective. Someone made it through dipping or moulding, turning rendered fat into portable light. That process required time, heat, and tolerance for smells that would not appear in nostalgic paintings. History often edits out the odour department. One old trick from rural households involved using rushes dipped in grease to make small lights. They burned fast, smoked badly, and required attention. But they could stretch scarce materials. Imagine inventing a lamp that basically says, "I will help," but not for long. The frontier did appreciate honesty, even from lighting technology. You set the candle down unlit. Food comes next. You cross to the shelf and untie the cornmeal sack. The contents are lower than you wish, though still present. You check the dried meat, the twist of salt, the hard bread, and perhaps a small bag of beans. Beans are comfort in theory. But unless already soaked or cooked, they are not helpful for a quick midnight meal. Beans have always believed in making people wait. Your stomach is quiet for now. The porridge did its duty. Still, you understand how fragile fullness is. In a storm lasting 2 or 3 days, this shelf would become a serious question. In a one-night trial, it is manageable. You tie each bundle tightly and move the most tempting food higher. Away from your small administrative mouse, a scratch answers from somewhere behind the wall. You pause and look toward it. "I heard that," you whisper. The mouse remains unmoved by frontier governance. Food storage created constant trouble in cabins and farmhouses. Rodents could invade grain. Damp could spoil flour. Insects could ruin stores. And poorly cured meat could fail. The survival of a household often depended on boring habits, tight sacks, hanging food, clean shelves, covered crocks, and suspicion toward every tiny noise near the pantry. You wipe a few crumbs from the table into your palm. They are coarse and dry against your skin. Rather than leave them for pests, you toss them into the fire. They vanish at once. Small losses teach you quickly. Earlier, you might have ignored crumbs. Now, every speck seems to belong to a larger battle. Water is the next count. The bucket holds some melted snow and cracked ice. The kettle has enough for another cup, maybe a little more. You decide to melt another measure while the fire is already warm. Snow is gathered from the drift near the door. But this time you move faster, opening the door only the width of your wrist. Cold lunges in immediately. Snow strikes your hand and stings like thrown salt. You scoop, shut the door, and brace it again. The gust has stirred ash across the hearthstone, and the fire flickers sideways with irritation. You stand still for a breath, listening for any change. The door holds, the latch rests, the wind retreats to complaining outside. You add snow to the kettle gradually, watching it collapse into water. The process feels almost comic now. So much snow becomes so little drink. The steam smells cleaner than the room around it. A faint relief beneath smoke. Moist heat touches your face, and your dry eyes welcome it. Your mouth has grown rough again from the smoky air. Different records leave unclear how families balanced water use during storms like this. Some memoirs describe careful preparation before bad weather, while others show people caught short by sudden changes. Weather forecasting was limited, and local signs could be misread. A red sky, restless livestock, or falling pressure might warn one household and mislead another. You think again about the distance to the well. In daylight, it might be nothing. In a blizzard at night, It becomes a test of memory, balance, clothing, and luck. Paths are not just routes. They are confidence repeated until it becomes habit. Snow breaks that confidence. It makes the familiar strange. You continue counting, clothing. You have a damp outer garment drying near the hearth, socks that are not yet frozen, and a cap keeping your ears from filing complaints. Bedding, one quilt, one hide, straw ticking, and the blanket that has done heroic work near the door. Tools, knife, poker, axe, broom, cup, kettle, bowl, spoon. The list comforts you. Inventory turns fear into categories. A nameless shortage is frightening. A measured shortage is something you can manage, bargain with, or endure. This may be why household account books, when they survive, feel oddly intimate. They show lives built from flour pounds, candle counts, salt measures, cloth yards, and debts paid slowly. Survival had columns. You add the medium log to the hearth at last. It catches after a few smoky moments. You do not add more. The flame is low but firm, and warmth begins to return to your hands. The wood pile has decreased by one piece. The room has gained another stretch of time. That is the exchange. Outside, the blizzard continues its patient mathematics. Snow against door, wind against wall, cold against timber. Inside, you answer with your own arithmetic. Logs remaining, water melting, food covered, candle saved, blanket tucked, fire banked. The night is not conquered, but it has been counted. You stand in the centre of the cabin and listen. Nothing urgent calls. The mouse keeps its distance. The roof holds beneath the snow. Your breath still fogs in the colder air near the table, but the hearth glows steadily enough. You feel tired, deeply tired, yet less helpless than before. The supplies are thin, but not gone. That is the whole blessing. You return the candle stub to its place and tighten the food sack one final time. Your fingers linger on the knot, feeling the rough cloth and the grit of meal dust. Then you step back toward the bed, carrying the knowledge of what remains. It is not abundance, it is a plan. The cabin smells of counted things now: smoke, grain, damp wool, wood, iron, and melting snow around you. Scarcity has become visible, but visibility has made it calmer. You know what must last. You know what must wait. You know what cannot be wasted. In the darkness beyond the shutter, the storm keeps spending itself wildly. Inside, you learn to spend slowly. The counted supplies settle your mind, but the night has not finished teaching. You have measured wood, water, food, light, and patience. Now the cabin asks you to remember the living world beyond its walls, not the great abstract wilderness from paintings and poems, the nearer world. Breath in a barn, paws under a floor, wings hunched in trees, eyes open in the storm. You return to the bed, but you do not climb in yet. Something about the room feels changed. The fire is steady, the door is braced, and the shutter remains closed, still. The air holds a new tension. It may be nothing. It may be the ordinary unease that comes after midnight, or it may be that some creature outside has noticed something before you have. The first sign is small. A muffled thud comes from beyond the wall, low and dull, as though something has shifted against packed snow. You stop with one hand on the quilt. The sound does not repeat. Wind brushes the cabin. Snow whispers at the threshold. The fire gives a tiny crack. You wait, and waiting becomes its own animal. Frontier families depended heavily on animals, not only for food or transport, but for warning. Dogs barked at strangers. Horses reacted to scents and sounds, and livestock often stirred before humans understood a change in weather or danger. These reactions were not magical. They were close observation, sharpened by need. A nervous animal could mean nothing. It could also mean everything. You cross softly toward the door and listen. The blanket at the threshold muffles the draft, and beyond it the storm mutters. You hear no clear hoof beat, no bark, no human voice. Then, faintly, from somewhere outside, comes a low sound. It might be a cow. It might be wood shifting under snow. It might be the wind performing another impression. You rest your palm on the door. The wood is cold enough to sting. Vibration passes through it when a gust strikes from the side. If livestock are kept nearby, they are somewhere in that white confusion, tucked in a shed or lean-to, standing in straw, tails turned from the wind. Their warmth is their own small hearth. You imagine a horse in the dark, ears flicking beneath a rough shelter. A horse hears more than you hear. It smells more than you smell. It knows the difference between wind and movement, between settling snow and a living body. A person may explain away a noise. An animal simply reacts. Sometimes that is wisdom enough. A practical custom from rural life rises in your memory. Farmers often checked animals before settling for the night, even in brutal weather, because a loose door, empty water, or panicked beast could cost dearly by morning. It was not sentiment alone. A cow could mean milk. A horse could mean ploughing, hauling, escape, and status. Affection and economics slept in the same stall. The cabin floor gives a tiny sound beneath you, a scratch, then another. Not from the shelf this time. Lower. You look down. The mouse may have moved under the boards, or perhaps another small creature shelters there from the cold. The frontier cabin is not yours alone. It is simply the warmest available argument. You almost laugh, but softly. Even survival has tenants. Some trappers and settlers recorded that small animals sometimes entered cabins, barns, or storage spaces during extreme cold. Mice, squirrels, insects, and other uninvited guests were common companions in rustic dwellings. Their presence was irritating, but also informative. If every creature wants indoors, the night outside is making a persuasive case. You lift the axe from its place near the door and set it closer to the bed, not because you plan some dramatic confrontation, but because tools should be reachable. The axe head is cold and heavy, smelling faintly of iron, sap, and old hands. Its handle is worn smooth in the middle. Touching it steadies you, though you hope it remains unnecessary. Another sound comes, clearer now, a scrape along the exterior wall, brief and rough. Your shoulders tighten, snow sliding from a log, a branch dragged by wind, an animal brushing against the cabin for shelter. All are possible. The room seems to pause with you. Firelight flickers along the chinking, illuminating the rag you wedged earlier like a tiny flag of resistance. You do not open the door. That decision comes quickly. Whatever waits outside, the storm itself is the larger danger. Opening the cabin to investigate every scrape would waste heat and invite panic. Frontier judgment often meant choosing which uncertainties to tolerate. Tonight, you tolerate the wall scrape. There is a disagreement among researchers about how often wolves, coyotes, or other predators directly threatened isolated cabins. Because many later accounts were shaped by memory, drama, and regional folklore. Wolves certainly existed in many frontier landscapes, and they could threaten livestock. Attacks on people were far less common than stories sometimes imply. Fear, however, does not need statistics to visit at night. A long howl rises somewhere beyond the storm, thin and distant. It may be a wolf, it may be a coyote, it may be wind catching a hollow. The sound stretches, breaks, and disappears into snow. You stand very still, listening to the silence left behind. The fire snaps once, and your body remembers to breathe. The howl does not come closer. You step back from the door and move toward the hearth. The floor feels hard beneath your boots. Your blanket slips again, and cold touches your wrist. You pour a small mouthful of warm water and let the cup heat your hands before drinking. The taste is smoky, flat, and precious. Your throat softens, and so does your fear. Animals shape frontier schedules in ways modern imagination often forgets. People rose early to milk, feed, water, harness, guard, tend births, and treat illness with whatever knowledge they had. A storm did not pause those obligations. If anything, bad weather made them more urgent. Your one-night survival is simple compared with caring for a household and animals through an entire winter. You think of chickens, if there are any, fluffed in a dark coop, making sleepy rustling sounds under their feathers. Chickens are not heroic creatures, but they are persistent in their own suspicious way. You think of a dog curled near a door in another cabin, ears twitching at each gust. You think of oxen breathing steam in a rough shelter, patient as old stones. The cabin's own animal life continues below. A faint skitter travels beneath the floorboards, then stops near the hearth, where warmth seeps downward. The smell of grain may have drawn the mouse closer, or simple survival. You decide not to begrudge it entirely. A creature that's small surviving this night has earned some respect, though not access to the cornmeal. You check the tide sack again, then wedge a tin plate over the top shelf as a crude barrier. It is not elegant. It will do. The phrase returns without asking. Familiar now. You're beginning to think like the room. Small repairs, small defences, small permissions denied to mice. Outside, the wind shifts direction. You can tell by the changed sound along the wall. The earlier pressure against the door eases, while the roof takes a lower, rolling rush. Snow may now be building along another side of the cabin. The animals, if they are awake, know this change too. They stand in darkness, bodies turned according to instinct older than any settlement. A frontier night is not human history alone. It is shared endurance across species, people, livestock, vermin, predators, birds, and trees. All answer the same cold in different languages. You're not separate from that world because logs surround you. The cabin is a pause in the weather, not an escape from nature. You return the axe within reach and bank the fire a little more carefully. Ash shifts with its soft, dusty sigh. Coals glow through the grey like patient eyes. The room smells a familiar now: smoke, hide, wet wool, warm iron, old straw, and a faint animal musk from the bedding. Your senses have stopped rejecting them. They have become the smell of staying alive. The scrape does not repeat. The distant howl does not return. Under the floor, the mouse grows quiet. Perhaps it has found warmth. Perhaps it has reconsidered its career in grain theft. Either outcome is acceptable. You lower yourself into the bed again and tuck the quilt around your legs. The hide settles heavily over you. From this low place, the door looks solid, the axe near enough, the fire steady. Beyond the walls, animals keep their own watch in snow and darkness. Some are frightened, some are sleeping, some are listening better than you ever could. You close your eyes, and for a moment you hear the cabin as part of a larger breathing world. Wind over roof, coals under ash, creatures under floor, unknown life beyond the drift. Nothing is entirely silent. Nothing is entirely alone. That thought is oddly comforting. The thought of animals keeping watch fades slowly, and your own body becomes the next landscape to examine. At first, you notice only ordinary discomfort, a chilled nose, damp cuffs, a stiff neck from lying on straw that has opinions about anatomy. Then the sensations gather more meaning. Cold does not only surround you, it enters by details. Your fingers ache when you flex them beneath the quilt. They are not numb now, but they remember being numb. Your toes feel better inside the boots, though better is a modest word tonight. Your throat remains dry from smoke, and your eyes sting each time the fire sends a bitter thread into the room. The cabin is shelter, but it is not medicine. You breathe carefully through your nose. The air smells of ash, damp wool, straw ticking, old leather, and the faint sourness of stored water. Each breath feels cool at first, then warmer near your chest under the blanket. You understand why winter sickness haunted places like this. The body has to work constantly just to remain ordinary. Cold houses were common in many rural places before modern heating, and winter health depended on clothing, fuel, food, ventilation, and luck. People lived with drafts, damp bedding, smoky rooms, and sudden temperature changes between hearth and wall. A cabin could protect life while still wearing it down slowly. That is a very frontier kind of bargain. You shift and listen to your joints complain. Your knees feel stiff from crouching by the hearth. Your back remembers hauling logs from the stack. Your hands smell faintly of smoke and iron, even after handling the blanket. Labour has entered your skin. The night has not asked for one heroic effort. It has asked for repeated small withdrawals from your strength. A cough rises in your throat. You hold it back at first, then let it come quietly into your sleeve. The sound seems too loud in the sleeping cabin. Smoke scratches behind your breastbone, leaving a dry tickle. Many open hearth interiors exposed families to heavy smoke, especially when chimneys drew poorly. Warmth and irritation arrived together, like relatives who refused separate invitations. You sit up and reach for the cup, the quilt slips, and cold immediately finds the damp place near your shoulder. You pull the cloth back around you, then take a sip of warmed water. It tastes flat, smoky, and slightly metallic. It also feels wonderful. The swallow soothes your throat for perhaps 10 seconds, which is 10 seconds more than before. Medical care on frontiers varied widely by place, time, community, and access. Families often relied on home remedies. Midwives, neighbours, printed guides, herbal knowledge, religious practice, and whatever doctor could be reached. During a blizzard, even a nearby healer might as well be across an ocean. Weather turns distance into authority. You glance toward the small twist of herbs near the table, maybe dried sage, mint, horehound, yarrow, or something gathered by hands that knew the local fields. Perhaps it is for tea, coughs, digestion, or simply the comfort of familiar smell. You do not know, in a real household. That knowledge might belong to a mother, grandmother, neighbour, or healer whose practical memory rarely entered official records. A lesser-known habit from older domestic medicine involved placing warmed bricks, stones, or wrapped pans near feet for heat. Some families used bed warmers when they had them, though metal pans filled with coals required care and confidence. The idea sounds cozy until one remembers sparks, straw, and sleepy people. Comfort has always enjoyed flirting with danger. You consider warming a stone by the hearth, but decide against unnecessary experiments. The fire already has enough responsibility. Instead, you tuck the hide more tightly around your feet and press your ankles together. Body heat becomes more useful when trapped. You curl slightly on your side. Reducing the space cold can occupy. It is not elegant, but anatomy is helping. Your damp clothing remains a concern. Wet fabric steals heat with cruel efficiency. Earlier, melted snow reached your sleeve and cuff. Near the hearth, your outer garment steams faintly, but the cloth against your body stays clammy. Frontier travellers knew the danger of dampness in cold weather. Though they did not use modern terminology, they knew the lesson through shivering, frostbite, coughs, and graves. You loosen the wet cuff and turn it outward where air can reach it. The movement exposes your wrist, and the cold bites immediately. You hurry. The cuff hangs awkwardly, but the damp part no longer rests directly against skin. A small correction. Yet your body notices. Survival, again, is 100 little edits. The roof creaks overhead, and snow slides somewhere outside with a padded rush. You wait for silence to return. Your pulse is slower than before, but fatigue makes every sound travel deeper. Illness begins in such conditions not only from cold, but from exhaustion. A tired person makes poor choices. A chilled, tired person makes them with trembling hands. Records from harsh winters reveal repeated worries about respiratory illness, frozen limbs, fever, childbirth, injury, and isolation. Yet interpretation is often difficult. Diagnoses in letters or diaries used older terms that do not always match modern categories. A lung fever, ague, or winter complaint could mean several different conditions. The human suffering was clear, even when the labels remain uncertain. You rub your chest gently through the blanket. The wool scratches your palm. Your breathing steadies. The firelight flickers against the ceiling, showing soot-dark rafters and drifting smoke. Ventilation is a cruel puzzle tonight. Seal every gap, and smoke may linger, leave too many openings, and cold enters. The cabin asks you to choose discomforts by degree. You turn your face toward the repaired corner. The rag still blocks the worst draught. Part of you is proud. Another part wonders whether blocking air has made the smoke thicker. The thought is annoying because it may be true. Human beings like clean answers, and cabins prefer compromises. The smell of herbs seems stronger now, perhaps awakened by warmth. You reach toward the table and crumble a small leaf between two fingers. It releases a sharp green scent. Dry and pleasant beneath the smoke. You hold it near your nose for a moment. The room changes. The scent suggests summer fields, buzzing insects, and sunlight stored in fragile leaves. That tiny fragrance helps more than expected. You drop the leaf into warm water, making the weakest possible tea. It colours the water only slightly. You sip and taste bitterness, smoke, and a shy trace of green. Whether it cures anything is uncertain, but it comforts you. Not all remedies work by chemistry alone. Some work by giving a frightened person something gentle to do. You think of people who endured longer nights while caring for someone ill, a child with fever, a spouse coughing near the hearth, an elder whose hands would not warm. The cabin that seems barely adequate for you alone could become frightening with another body needing help. Survival then would include listening to breath, changing cloths, heating water, and praying dawn arrived with better choices. The fire sinks slightly, and you add one small stick, no blaze, just enough to keep the coals open. The stick catches with a narrow flame and a clean crackle. Heat brushes your face, and your eyes water again. You blink slowly, accepting the sting as part of the bargain. Your body has become more understandable now. Thirst, cold, smoke, dampness, stiffness, fatigue. None of these has conquered you, but each requires attention. A frontier cabin during a blizzard is not only a test of shelter, it is a test of noticing when discomfort begins turning into danger. You slide back under the quilt and pull the hide over your knees. The bed receives you with rustling straw and a pocket of saved warmth. The herbal taste lingers faintly on your tongue. Outside, the storm continues its cold sermon across the roof and walls. Inside, your breath slows, shallow but steady. You're not sick tonight. Not yet. You're merely tired, smoky, chilled, and damp around the edges, on the frontier. That counted as manageable. You close your eyes and let the warmth gather again around your chest. The cabin holds imperfectly. Your body holds imperfectly. For now, imperfect is enough. The weaker herbal taste fades from your tongue, and the cabin settles into its deepest tiredness. Not silence, never silence, but something slower, as if even the storm has begun pacing itself. The fire is low again, the kettle rests in shadow, and the roof creaks with the careful dignity of old bones holding their shape. This is the longest hour before dawn. You do not know the exact time. There is no clock ticking politely on the wall, no glowing screen, no reliable minute to blame. The night measures itself by coals, thirst, stiffness, and the number of times you have opened your eyes. It is amazing how long darkness can feel when morning refuses to send even a rumour. You lie under the quilt and listen to your own breathing. It sounds rougher than usual, softened by wool near your face. Each inhale carries smoke, damp straw, warm hide, and cold wood. Each exhale makes a faint mist when it escapes the blanket's edge. The cabin seems to breathe with you, timber and lungs sharing the same uncertain rhythm. Before watches and clocks became common in every household, many rural people read time through natural signs, work routines, candle length, animal behaviour, and the progress of fires. Winter nights could stretch without precise measurement. Dawn was not a number, it was an event, earned slowly through endurance. You turn toward the hearth. The coals glow faintly, red beneath a soft collapse of ash. They are alive, but only just. You know you should rise soon. You also know your body would prefer to become part of the bedding until April. The debate is brief. Because cold has excellent rhetorical skills, you sit up. The room receives you with a grey chill. Your joints feel wooden, and your shoulders ache from curling tightly for warmth. The straw ticking crackles as you swing your legs over the side of the bed. For a moment, you simply sit there, wrapped in the quilt, staring at the hearth like a person asked to solve mathematics before breakfast. Then you move. Your boots are less cold than before. Perhaps because your expectations have declined, you step across the floor, where each plank or packed patch gives back a different kind of hardness. Near the hearth, ash smells dry and mineral. You crouch and stir the coals gently, letting air find their red centres. Light grows by fractions. You add a few slivers of kindling. Their pale edges blacken, curl, and catch. A thread of flame rises, thin as a grass blade. You shield it with your hand, though no wind reaches it. The gesture is instinctive. Small flames invite protectiveness. They're needy little miracles with very practical benefits. The cabin brightens just enough to show its disorder. Bowl by the hearth, cup near the kettle, blanket at the door, axe within reach, damp garment stiffening as it dries. Each object sits where the night has required it, not where tidiness would prefer. Survival has rearranged the room into a map of need. You take the cup and drink the last warmish mouthful. It has cooled to something between water and memory, but it helps. Your lips feel cracked. Your throat accepts the liquid gratefully. Outside, the wind lowers, then rises again, dragging snow along the wall with a sound like a broom over stone. A small domestic custom returns to your mind, oddly comforting in the gloom. Some households saved the first careful chores before dawn for whoever woke earliest, stirring coals, heating water, setting meal to soak, checking animals, and clearing the door. No bell announced the work. The body simply learned the hour. The rooster, when present, merely took credit. You almost smile. Roosters have always had public relations talent. You add one modest log and wait as smoke curls around it. It resists at first, then catches along a cracked seam. The flame grows steady, not cheerful exactly, but willing. Heat reaches your hands. The warmth hurts a little as it returns to your fingers. A prickling reminder that comfort sometimes arrives with teeth. The hour before dawn is difficult because strength is lowest then. You have eaten, but not much. You have slept, but only in torn scraps. Your body is chilly, smoky, and tired from decisions. Every simple action feels ceremonial. Lift kettle, check door, count wood, tuck blanket, stir ash, sit, breathe. You go to the door and press your ear near the boards. The sound outside has changed. The storm still moves, but the gusts are less savage, more spaced apart. Snow has packed deeply against the lower half, muting the draft. The door feels colder than stone under your palm. Morning will not open easily. In blizzard conditions, snowdrifts could seal doors, bury fences, hide wells, and erase landmarks. People sometimes had to dig out from inside, exit through windows, or wait for help if drifts were extreme. A small house could become a snow cave with furniture. This is charming only from a great distance. You test the brace. It holds firmly, perhaps too firmly. You will leave it until light. Opening the door now would trade information for heat, and heat remains more useful. You brush loose snow from the threshold again, moving quietly, as though not wanting to wake the weather. The broom scratches softly. That small sound steadies you. There is no clear line between fear and patience now. They have blended into vigilance. You are too tired to panic, but too alert to relax. The cabin feels like a ship at night, creaking through a white ocean without moving. You are passenger, crew, cook, watchman, and slightly underqualified captain. Questions remain about how isolated settlers described emotional strain in winter, because many accounts valued toughness and understatement. A diary might say only that the night was very cold or bad travelling, while the body behind the ink endured anxiety, exhaustion, and worry. Sparse words can hide crowded experiences. You understand that now. Very cold could mean stiff fingers, smoky lungs, damp bedding, and listening for the roof to fail. Bad storm could mean rationing wood, melting snow, and wondering whether animals still stand outside. History's plain phrases may be sleeping under heavy blankets of meaning. The fire grows more stable. You sit beside it and let its warmth reach your knees. Your face feels dry and tight. Your hair and clothing smell so thoroughly of smoke that you suspect the scent has become legally binding. The cabin air is thick, but familiar. It has stopped surprising you, which is another kind of survival. A faint change appears at the window covering. Not light, exactly, more a thinning of darkness. The oiled paper or shutter edge seems less black than before. You stare at it, unsure whether your tired mind is inventing dawn. Then the fire pops, and the glow from the hearth confuses everything again. You wait. The longest hour stretches because hope arrives before evidence. You begin expecting morning, then noticing it is still night. You hear a lull and think the storm is ending. Then another gust rushes over the roof. You see a pale seam and think of sunrise. Then ash falls, and the cabin darkens. Dawn is not a door opening. It is a negotiation with shadow. Your stomach tightens faintly. Not hunger yet, but the idea of hunger beginning work. The cornmeal remains on the shelf, protected from the mouse by knots and your stern administration. Breakfast can wait, the fire cannot. You stir the log again and pull ash toward one side, giving the flame a clean path. The room warms by tiny degrees. The bowl near the hearth is dry. Your damp garment has lost some of its wet smell. The blanket at the door is stiff at the bottom where melted snow has chilled again. You notice all these things because the night has made you observant. You are learning to read small changes as news. Outside, the storm gives one long sigh across the cabin. Snow shifts heavily somewhere near the door. The wall no longer scrapes with flying ice as sharply as before. Perhaps the wind is tiring. Perhaps it has merely turned its attention elsewhere. Weather never explains its schedule, which seems inconsiderate. You lean back against the hearthside wall and close your eyes for several breaths. The log is cold through your blanket, but the fire warms your face. Between those two sensations, you rest. Cold behind, heat before. Darkness thinning somewhere ahead. The whole night has been this balance, repeated in different forms. When you open your eyes again, the window covering has definitely changed. A dull bluish grey presses at its edges. Not sunlight yet, not dawn in full. But the black has loosened. The cabin's shapes have begun separating from shadow without help from the fire. You do not celebrate loudly. The room would not know what to do with that. Instead, you place one small stick on the coals and watch it catch. You tighten the food sack again. Because mice do not respect emotional milestones, You touch the door brace, the kettle, the cup, the axe handle. Each one is still there. Each one has played its part. The longest hour has not ended completely, but it has been crossed. You can feel morning gathering outside the storm. Pale and patient, your body remains tired, your throat smoky, your clothes imperfectly dry. Yet you're still inside, still thinking, still tending the fire for this hour. That is victory enough. The grey at the window covering grows stronger. Not bright yet, but undeniable. It seeps around the edges of the shutter and turns the cabin from a cave into a room again. The change is quiet. No trumpet. No sunrise spilling gold across the floor. Just the slow return of shapes, one rough object at a time. You sit near the hearth and watch the table emerge. The tin cup has a dent you missed before. The wooden bowl shows a darker stain along one side. The chair leg is uneven, which explains its faint wobble. Night had made everything mysterious. Morning makes everything practical again, which is less romantic and often more useful. The fire is low but steady. You feed it a small stick, then another, coaxing heat without spending too much of the remaining wood. The flames brighten, and smoke lifts reluctantly up the chimney. Your eyes water, but less than before. Perhaps the draught has improved. Perhaps you're simply too tired to protest. Outside, the blizzard has softened into a heavy, blowing hush. Wind remains, but it no longer strikes the cabin with quite the same rage. Snow still moves past the cracks, faint and pale. The storm is not gone. It has merely changed from attack to occupation. You stand slowly, your legs feel stiff, and your boots scrape over the floor. The quilt slips from your shoulders, and cold air finds the back of your neck. You pull it tight again before crossing to the door. The blanket at the threshold is crusted at the bottom with frozen damp. It feels hard where you touch it, like cloth pretending to be bark. You remove the wedge and test the door with one cautious pull. It does not move. You try again, harder. The door shifts perhaps the width of a fingernail, then stops. Snow presses against it from outside, packed and heavy, during winter storms. Drifts could block exits so firmly that people had to dig their way out or use alternate openings. A cabin could become shelter and trap together. You pause, breathing through your nose. No need for drama. The door is not refusing forever. It is simply negotiating on behalf of several £100 of snow. You replace the brace loosely, then look toward the window. If the shutter opens inward, it may offer a view. If it opens outward, the drift may have opinions. The cabin's pale morning light reveals the smoke stains high on the rafters. Soot hangs there like dark weather that never left. The chinking repairs look crude but effective. The rag in the corner is frosted at one edge, proof that the draft kept working all night. Your small defences were not perfect. They were enough. You move to the window and loosen its peg. The shutter resists, then opens a handspan inward with a dry creak. Cold light slips in, blue and flat. You lean close, careful not to tear the oiled covering or disturb the frame. Through the narrow gap, the outside world appears transformed. Everything is white, not simply snow-covered, but remade. The ground has disappeared into smooth drifts and sharp ridges. Fence posts rise like short dark teeth from the snow, barely visible. A path that should lead toward the well has vanished completely. The familiar yard is now a blank page written over by wind. Snow changes distance, the barn or shed, if visible at all, seems farther away than it should. Its roof is loaded with a rounded weight, and one side is nearly swallowed by drift. A trough, stump, or cart might be buried beneath the smooth surface. Nothing announces itself honestly. Morning has arrived, but it has brought a puzzle. In many frontier settlements, roads and paths were seasonal things, vulnerable to mud, dust, flood, and snow. Winter travel could depend on landmarks, fences, tree lines, frozen rivers, or memory. A blizzard erased those guides and made even short distances dangerous. A neighbour half a mile away might become unreachable for a day or more. You listen through the cracked shutter. The sound outside is larger now that you can see it. Wind combs the drifts with the dry hiss. Somewhere, loose wood knocks softly. No animal calls reach you clearly. The air pouring through the opening smells clean and severe, so cold it seems to have no scent at first. Then you catch pine, snow, and distant barn straw. The clean smell is startling after the cabin's smoke-thick night. It enters your nose like a bell. For one foolish second, you want to throw the door open and breathe deeply. Then cold bites your cheek, and your judgment returns from its brief vacation. Fresh air is beautiful. Too much of it indoors is treason. You close the shutter most of the way, leaving only a narrow seam for light. The room dims, but not fully. Morning remains. That feels important. You turn back to the hearth and warm your hands. Your palms are dry, rough, and faintly grey with ash. Your nails hold traces of wood dust and meal. You look like someone who has been apprenticed to discomfort. A small curiosity about snow travel surfaces as you picture the buried path. Some settlers improvise snowshoes, sleds, or runners when conditions demanded it, while others relied on packed trails made by repeated passage. In treeless areas, people sometimes marked routes with poles or other visible guides, without markers. A white yard could become strangely unreadable. Snow has terrible handwriting. You consider the next tasks: clear the door, check the animals, find the well or melt more snow, preserve the fire, eat something, dry what can be dried. None of these tasks waits politely until you feel poetic. Morning survival is just night survival with better lighting. Still, the feeling in your chest has changed. The blizzard no longer seems infinite. It may continue for hours. But it has passed through one complete darkness without defeating the cabin. That matters. Night magnifies uncertainty. Daylight does not solve everything, but it gives problems edges. You take the broom and push loose snow away from the inner threshold again. The scratching sound is familiar now, almost companionable. Then you use the flat side of a board to press against the door's lower gap, loosening the snow packed there from inside. A little powder spills inward. It glitters faintly in the blue light, then melts near the hearth's warmth. The work is slow. You do not spend all your strength. A blocked door can be handled in stages, and exhaustion is a poor shovel. You clear what you can, then rest, listening. The roof gives a soft release as more snow slides from one edge. It lands outside with a muted thump. The cabin shivers, then steadies. Accounts from severe 19th century storms often describe people digging paths between house and barn, sometimes through drifts higher than a person. Exact depths can be hard to verify, because memory loves height when describing hardship. Yet the labour was real enough. Snow had to be moved before water, animals, fuel, and neighbours could be reached. You open the shutter seam again and study the yard. The drifts are sculpted by wind, curled in soft waves against every obstacle. The door side is heavily packed, but one leeward corner may be lower. If you must go out later, that may be your route. Planning begins before the first step, especially when the world has been rearranged. The fire behind you cracks, bringing your attention back indoors. Breakfast is not ready, water is low, and the woodpile remains modest. Dawn has not ended need. It has simply made you less alone with it. The cabin's details, invisible in the night, now become partners in decision. Door, window, shovelboard, hearth, shelf, bucket. A pale band of light touches the floorboards. It reveals footprints, ash smears, melted snow spots, and the line where the door blanket lay. The room looks untidy, smoky, and deeply human. Every mark tells part of the night story. Here you stood with snow in your sleeve. Here you stirred the coals. Here you blocked a draught. Here you counted what remained. You feel an unexpected tenderness for the rough place. It failed in many small ways, and yet it held. It smoked your eyes, chilled your back, creaked above you, and let a mouse conduct business near your food. But it also kept the wind from taking you. Imperfect shelter is still shelter. You return to the hearth and lift the kettle. Enough water remains for one careful cup. You warm it, watching steam thread upward in the grey light. The smell of smoke rises again, mingled now with cold morning air from the shutter seam. It is the scent of having crossed something. Outside, the drift waits at the door. The barn waits beyond the whitened yard. The well waits somewhere under a vanished path. The day ahead will be labour, not celebration. Yet you hold the cup between both hands and feel the heat enter your palms. First light does not promise ease. It promises another chance. You hold the warm cup in both hands while the cabin brightens by degrees. The storm has not disappeared, but it has lost the strange authority it held at midnight. Morning light presses softly through the shutter seam, grey and cold, touching the floorboards where ash, melted snow, and boot marks tell the story of your night. The room looks smaller now, not safer in a magical way, not suddenly charming enough for a painting, but knowable. The hearth is blackened and stubborn. The door is packed with snow. The table is plain, the bowl dry, the woodpile reduced, and the blanket at the threshold stiff with frozen damp. Every object seems tired. So do you. You sip the smoky water slowly. It tastes of iron, ash, and survival. The heat reaches your chest and spreads with modest kindness. Your throat is still rough. Your clothes smell like a chimney that developed opinions. Your fingers are dry and sore from wood, cloth, cold, and practical work. Still, they close around the cup. You are here. That is the whole answer to the night's question. Could you survive one night in a frontier cabin during a blizzard? Yes, perhaps, if the cabin had already been built well enough, stocked well enough, and repaired before the worst wind arrived. Yes, if the fire lived, the wood lasted, the door held, and your judgment stayed calmer than your imagination. Yes, if luck agreed to sit quietly in the corner. But survival was never only about toughness. Frontier life depended on preparation, tools, neighbours, stored food, seasonal knowledge, animal care, and the repeated labour of ordinary people. A cabin was not a romantic escape from the world. It was a working structure inside a larger system of fields, forests, roads, trade, kinship, weather, and fatigue. You can feel that truth in your bones now. The hearth, which seemed like a comforting centerpiece at first, became a demanding companion. It needed air, fuel, attention, and restraint. The walls needed patching. The water needed melting. The food needed rationing. The bedding needed strategy. Even fear needed management, because a frightened mind can burn wood too quickly, open doors unwisely, or listen too closely to harmless knocks. You look at the repaired corner where the rag still plugs the draft. It is such a small thing, a scrap of cloth, pushed into a crack with cold fingers. Yet that scrap changed the room. Not dramatically, not heroically. It simply softened the air enough to matter. Much of survival lives at that scale. The shutter creaks faintly. You open it another inch and peer outside. The world remains white and altered. The path to the well is erased. The yard is a field of drifts, ridges, hollows, and hidden objects. The barn roof carries a thick load of snow. If animals wait there, they must be checked soon. Morning has brought relief, but it has also brought chores. The air slipping through the opening smells clean, sharp, and enormous. Snow, pine, distant straw, and frozen earth move together in one bright breath. After the cabin's smoke and wool, the scent feels almost like drinking cold light. It wakes you, gently but firmly. You close the shutter again before the room loses too much heat. One less obvious detail from frontier winters stays with you. Some families marked paths to wells, barns, or privies with ropes, poles, fences, or remembered alignments, because storms could turn familiar yards into dangerous blank spaces. In deep, blowing snow, a person could lose direction only steps from home. The ordinary path became a lifeline. You think of the path you cannot see. Another uncertainty remains in the record. Personal accounts often make frontier endurance sound either impossibly grim or warmly nostalgic, depending on who wrote them and when. Memories can polish hardship into legend, or sharpen misery into warning. The actual night, as you have felt it, sits between those extremes. It is neither postcard nor nightmare. It is work in the dark. The fire gives a small collapse. A charred piece drops inward, sending a pulse of orange through the coals. You crouch and stir it lightly, then add one thin stick. Not much. You have learned restraint. The flame rises, catches, and steadies. Lighting the underside of the kettle, smoke climbs, then vanishes into the chimney. The cabin smells as it did all night, but now you understand each layer. Smoke from the hearth, damp wool near the fire, straw from the bed, grain dust near the shelf, iron from the cup, cold wood from the walls, a faint animal musk from the hide. None of it is decorative. It is the scent of materials doing their jobs. You turn toward the bed. The quilt lies rumpled, holding the shape of your restless sleep. The hide has slipped toward one side. The straw ticking is dented and uneven. Earlier, it seemed crude. Now it looks almost kind. It held warmth where it could. It gave your tired body somewhere to gather itself between fire watches. A small scratch comes from near the shelf. The mouse, naturally, has survived too. You glance toward the cornmeal sack and find it still tied. The tin plate remains in place like a ridiculous little fortress. You nod once, as if concluding negotiations. The mouse may keep its life. The meal remains yours. Civilization advances by tiny treaties. You step to the door and press your shoulder against it. Snow resists outside, packed hard. You do not force it yet. First, you will warm yourself, drink the last of the cup, and choose your next effort carefully. Digging out will take time. Checking the barn may take courage. Reaching the well may require making a new path through a world without lines. But those are daylight problems. The night problem has passed. You stand in the center of the room and let that settle. All the tasks return as memories closing the door, waking the coals, blocking the draft, melting snow, stirring supper, listening to the wall, rising at midnight, counting supplies, hearing the distant howl, tasting herbal water, waiting for dawn. None of them alone was grand. Together, they became endurance. This is what the frontier often was, not endless spectacle, but repeated attention. Not one brave moment, but many small refusals to give up heat, food, direction, or sense. The people who lived through such winters were not always fearless. They were practiced. Practice can look like courage from a safe distance. The cabin holds its quiet around you, outside. Wind brushes the drift with a softer hand. Inside, the fire keeps its low conversation with ash. You finish the water and set the cup beside the bowl. The sound is tiny, but satisfying. Metal on wood. Morning in a room that survived. Now the pace changes. You no longer need to listen for every knock as though it carries a verdict. You no longer need to stare at the fire with midnight urgency. The blizzard has left work behind, but it has also left proof. You made it from darkness to grey light, from uncertainty to tasks, from the first hard shove of wind at the door to this still, smoky breath after dawn. So you let the cabin become softer in your mind. The rough logs are no longer only walls. They are dark lines stacked patiently between you and the cold. The chinking is not merely mud and straw. It is a quiet seam of care. The hearth is not only stone, ash, and danger. It is a red memory of warmth, waiting under the morning's pale light. You breathe in slowly. Smoke, wool, snow, wood. You breathe out, and the room seems to loosen with you. The storm moves beyond the cabin now, still present, but farther from the center of your attention. Its voice becomes a low hush at the edge of hearing. The roof creaks once, then rests. The shutter settles. The mouse keeps still, perhaps also respecting the hour. The cup is empty. The fire is alive. The door will open when it must. For now, you sit near the hearth and let your tired hands rest open on your knees. The warmth touches your palms, then your wrists, then your sleeves. You imagine the snow outside smoothing every track, covering every sharp corner, softening the stumps and stones and fences under one pale blanket. The world has not become easy, but it has become quiet. Your breathing slows. The cabin is dim gold near the fire and blue-grey near the shutter. Between those colours, you rest in the small middle space that kept you alive. Nothing dramatic needs to happen now. No final test arrives. No hidden danger steps from the storm. Only morning, coals, breath, and the ordinary tenderness of being warm enough. Let the snow keep falling where it needs to fall. Let the barn wait a little longer. Let the ash settle softly over the coals. You have walked through one winter night in a frontier cabin, and you have learned its slow language. Feed the fire, guard the warmth, count what remains, listen carefully, but not fearfully. Accept imperfect shelter, trust small tasks, rest when the room allows it. The wind thins to a whisper, the fire lowers to a glow. Your eyes grow heavy again, not with fear this time, but with release. The cabin holds the morning gently, and you do not need to ask anything more of the dark. You're safe enough for this breath, and then the next one, and then the next. Sleep well.